Chapter 27-23. The proud Ice King. The appearance of a droplet of sacred feathers essence blood had completely infuriated Jian Chen. He fell into a rage as killing intent surged through his body. Wielding the axe with both hands, he leaped past the ruined city walls and charged directly into the Dark Night City. As he did that, he became enveloped by the laws of strength. He had already pushed the Mid-God King laws of strength beyond its limit. Even though it had not reached Late God King, it was growing closer and closer. His current form was highly compatible with the laws of strength, as if it resonated with the golden core of the laws of strength, releasing the power of laws hidden within strand by strand and allowing Jian Chen to absorb it, thus deepening his comprehension of the laws of strength. The strength of Mid-God King is still not enough. My laws of strength needs to break through. Only if I reach Late God King can I deal with the current situation I'm in. Even though Jian Chen's heart was filled with killing intent, he had not lost his rationale. He looked in the direction of the city lord's estate. His eyes seemed to belong to a god of death from hell, cold and emotionless. Stop him. Don't let him enter the city. A series of cries rang out from the Dark Night City. Immediately, many god kings hidden throughout Dark Night City roused from their cultivation. The Dark Night City was a city of their Darkstar race. Over 90% of the people in there were members of the Darkstar race, with less than 10% of the population as outsiders. If a battle erupted in the city, just the number of weaker clansmen of the Darkstar race that would die would be inestimable, let alone how damaged the city would become. Swish. 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 Over 20 figures immediately charged into the sky and surrounded Jian Chen from all directions. However, all of these people had reached Late God King. All Late God Kings. There were no longer any Mid-God Kings who took part. Everyone back off. This king will personally kill this person, the proud Ice King's voice rang out at this moment. It was filled with evident fury and sunkenness. He had spent several million years comprehending in order to grasp this true god-tier battle skill, the Star of Apocalypse. He used it earlier in an attempt to kill this outsiders cleanly. It was going overboard with his identity to use a god-tier battle skill against a Mid-God King. Even if he did kill the Mid-God King, there was no sense of achievement at all. Instead, he wanted to use this as a great opportunity to demonstrate to the entire city the might of his god-tier battle skill. This was because of the 108 kings in Dark Night City. According to the rules, every single one of them needed to have grasped a god-tier battle skill at the very least. These positions would be chosen by the law of the jungle. However, out of the 108 kings, the proud Ice King was the only one who had not grasped a god-tier battle skill. As a result, he had always been rather undeserving of his title among the 108 kings. This had always weighed on the proud Ice King's mind. Now that the proud Ice King had finally grasped the Star of Apocalypse, he wanted to demonstrate the wondrous glory of his god-tier battle skill, so he could tell the entire city that the position of a king was rightfully his. He had never thought that the god-tier battle skill he took pride in would even fail to kill a Mid-God King. How would the people of the Dark Night City look at him now? The mighty proud Ice King had spent so much difficulty in comprehending a god-tier battle skill, yet it was so measly that it even failed to kill a Mid-God King? The proud Ice King immediately felt his face heat up. He had made a fool of himself. Suddenly, a huge hand extended out from the city. The hand was completely condensed from energy. When it had spread out, it was several hundred meters wide, seemingly enough to engulf an entire region. The proud Ice King took action once more. He did not appear, remaining hidden somewhere in the city as he launched his attack at Jian Chen from afar. Jian Chen roared out and the muscles on his arms swelled up firmly. Veins popped out as he pushed his strength to the limit. He swung the axe in his hands again and again, forming a curtain of axe swings before him. What power! Every single strike is no weaker than us. Yet he's actually produced so many strikes in a single breath. Won't he become exhausted? Don't tell me his strength is never ending. The Late God Kings in the surroundings were all surprised when they witnessed this. In just a single second, Jian Chen had swung the axe several dozen times. Each swing left a huge shadow in the air. He had forcefully cut the proud Ice King's hand of energy to pieces. The proud Ice King was no longer able to stay put. As if he had been viciously provoked, he suddenly appeared in the air with a snort. He stared at Jian Chen extremely icily. He wore white clothes and had long, snow-white hair that reached his waist. His appearance was extremely youthful, maintained at around when he was 20 years old. He had a striking figure. You should feel proud in dying by my hand since you managed to force me out. You have gained the right to leave your name behind, the proud Ice King said coldly while standing there with his arms crossed. Jian Chen sneered. He said nothing at all, directly swinging his axe with a sliver of power from the chaotic body. Humph, you're like a glistening grain of rice trying to challenge the moon in radiance. The proud Ice King snorted coldly. He raised his hand with composure and directly grabbed Jian Chen's axe. When he made contact with the axe, the proud Ice King shuddered violently and his expression changed. What strength! The proud Ice King was secretly surprised. A great force surged through his hand. He shook off the axe with the tremble, before checking his hand, only to discover that it was now wounded, covered in blood. Jian Chen and the proud Ice King engaged in an intense battle over the Dark Night City. Jian Chen swung his axe constantly, without the slightest pause, at the proud Ice King. The proud Ice King demonstrated his strength as one of the 108 kings. His strength had completely surpassed regular late god kings. Even within the saints' world, he was enough to rank within the top 100 of the God King's throne. He made full use of his advantages and his opponent's disadvantages, avoiding direct clashes with Jian Chen. He used the advantage of his higher cultivation to fight against Jian Chen. Jian Chen was obviously not his opponent since he only used the power of a mid-god king. He was overwhelmed by the proud Ice King. After several heavy attacks from the proud Ice King, the supreme quality Saint artifact axe in his hand dimmed slightly, as if it could not last much longer. The Dark Night City below was affected as well. The ripples of energy destroyed many streets and buildings. Large numbers of weaker cultivators fled for their lives. Proud Ice King, if you don't finish off this person quickly, the Dark Night City will be destroyed by your hands, a resonant voice rang out from the Dark Night City. It was mocking him. The voice came from another king. He had always been on bad terms with the proud Ice King. At the same time, several kings vanished from within the Dark Night City, along with a great group of late god kings. These people all scattered into the surroundings with their presences concealed, forming a net. They seemed to encapsulate the entire region, enveloping all four directions to prevent Jian Chen from escaping. Let alone the Dark Night City, even the entire Darkstar race would not let such a powerful outsider escape. Provoked by the mocking remarks, the proud Ice King fell into a rage. He immediately stopped holding back and an icy sword appeared in his hand. The sword was a supreme quality saint artifact, as well as the proud Ice King's strongest weapon. Now that the sword had been drawn, it meant that the proud Ice King was unleashing his full strength. At the same time, in the City Lord's estate. City Lord, whether it's inside or outside the city, all the arrangements have been completed. We are certain that the outsider cannot escape, Caretaker Hung reported to the City Lord Bai Jin. Bai Jin nodded, good. Send out the Swift Wind King, Sword-Wielding King, Dark Shadow King, Heavenly Fist King and Earthquaking King. Have them work with the proud Ice King to kill this person. Chapter 27-24. The Six Kings, the Swift Wind King, the Sword-Wielding King, the Dark Shadow King, the Heavenly Fist King and the Earthquaking King have all been kings for a longer time than the proud Ice King. They're stronger than the proud Ice King as well. We're utilizing 6 kings just to deal with an outsider mid-god king. Isn't that going a little overboard? The vice leader Shueisha said. We can't afford to underestimate any outsider who can challenge people at higher cultivation levels, because most of these people probably have received extraordinary legacies, so they possess various, strange secret techniques. Killing people like that won't be easy. Bai Jin stared at Jian Chen as he fought against the proud Ice King and continued, the proud Ice King might have the upper hand, but it's almost impossible to kill this outsider. This is why we need multiple people. So what if it's overkill? As long as we can kill this outsider, it doesn't matter even if we mobilize all 108 kings, let alone just 6. Bai Jin seemed calm, but he treated Jianchen like he had to die today. The Dark Star race might have been a little more tolerant if Jianchen was just an ordinary mid-god king, but he was just too powerful. The Dark Star race could not allow such an impossibly strong outsider move about freely in their own world. As soon as Bai Jin issued his order, 5 powerful presences surged out within the Dark Night City. The Swift Wind King, the Sword-Wielding King, the Dark Shadow King, the Heavenly Fist King and the Earth-Quaking King appeared. Together with the Proud Ice King, the 6 of them poured their strength together in an attempt to kill Jianchen. Why have you come? It's more than enough for me to kill this person alone. Why must you take part too? The Proud Ice King's expression changed with the appearance of the 5 other kings, which made him furious. He was unwilling to accept their help. He knew that the outsider would have no chance at surviving once 6 kings fought together, but this was not what the Proud Ice King wanted. He wanted to kill this outsider who had embarrassed him before the entire city with his own hands. Hee, Proud Ice King, don't bite off more than you can chew. If you really could kill him, he would have died at the city gates already. Why would he still be alive right now? One of the 5 reinforcing kings produced a sneer. He was mocking the Proud Ice King. The Proud Ice King said nothing. There was a flash of coldness in his eyes and his face became incredibly sunken. The other kings remained silent. They each occupied a different direction as if they had read each other's minds, forming a net around Jianchen. The Swift Wind King had comprehended the laws of wind, so he was extremely fast. Hovering in the air, fierce winds immediately began to sweep through the surroundings. He seemed to have become a part of the gales around him, constantly fluttering about swiftly. He moved around like a shadow, difficult to capture. The sword-wielding king carried a sword which shone with blinding light. He comprehended the laws of the sword. With a swing of his sword, the surroundings immediately became filled with dense slashes. The Dark Shadow King matched his name. He seemed like a shadow, seemingly varying in tangibility, which seemed extremely strange. The Heavenly Fist King and the Earth-Quaking King were 2 burly men. They seemed even tougher than how Jianchen looked right now, towering over 3 meters tall. They basically seemed like 2 small giants. The 2 of them were known for their physical strength. The Heavenly Fist King had grasped the way of the fist. His attacks were extremely swift and vicious. Swinging both fists, he launched a storm-like barrage. The Earth-Quaking King had comprehended the laws of Earth. Yellow light flickered on his body while he was clad with seemingly indestructible armor condensed from the laws of Earth. The 5 of them launched vicious attacks at Jianchen as soon as they joined the battle. Even though they also felt that it was overkill to send 6 kings against a mere mid-god king, they did not hold back at all when they actually began fighting. Jianchen immediately felt tremendously pressured against the 6 of them. It had already been rather difficult for him to hold his ground against just the Proud Ice King, so now that there were 5 additional kings, none of which were weaker than the Proud Ice King, he could not fight back at all. It's already extraordinary for me to be able to hold my ground against the Proud Ice King as a mid-god king. Now that the Dark Star race has sent out another 5 kings, it won't make sense for me to be able to match them. It'll just raise suspicion, thought Jianchen. At the same time, the Heavenly Fist King arrived behind him and threw a punch. With a thought, Jianchen began to withdraw the chaotic force in his body, pulling all of it back into his Naiden, so the defenses of his chaotic body had been minimized. Just as the Heavenly Fist King was about to land his punch, Jianchen's will from the ultimate way of the sword radiated out, condensing into a strand of invisible sword chi that stabbed viciously into his own back. With a grunt, the Heavenly Fist King's iron-like fist landed on Jianchen's back with great force. Blood spurted from Jianchen's mouth and his back became a bloody mess. He was knocked away. The Heavenly Fist King frowned. He stared at Jianchen's bloody back in suspicion. When he landed his punch on this outsider, he felt that something was amiss, but where? He was uncertain. The Proud Ice King, Sword-Wielding King, Dark Shadow King, Earthquaking King and Swift Wind King did not just stand around. They all launched attacks as well, immediately creating a storm of constant booms above the Dark Knight City. Most of them chose to use powerful, ranged attacks against Jian Chen from a certain distance away. Rarely would they engage in close combat. But without any exception, they would all experience a strange sensation upon heavily injuring him when they did engage in close combat, yet they were unable to locate why it was strange. Under the merciless attacks of the Six Kings, Jian Chen's injuries increased. After a short moment, he became covered in blood as blood spurted out from his mouth time after time as well. He seemed severely injured, hanging on by a single thread, in his current state, to anyone who looked at him. Jian Chen unleashed a furious bellow. His eyes became scarlet as he seemed to lose his mind. He fought back as hard as he could as the laws of strength revolved around him. Even though the power of his laws were constantly dispersed, he continued to resist with everything he had. Through this process, the golden core in his body produced the laws of strength faster and faster. All of it was absorbed by Jian Chen, allowing him to comprehend the laws with great speed. His understanding of the laws of strength became richer and more complete as time went on. Now, he was just a stride away from reaching Late God King with the laws of strength. To think that the outsider would actually so tough. The Six Kings have failed to kill him immediately even when they are working together, by Jin sighed in surprise in the city lord's estate. Afterwards, he showed a tinge of pity. It's just unfortunate that someone as talented as him isn't a part of our race. Otherwise, we'd probably gain another primordial realm expert. The outsider's strength is indeed a little too extreme. Not only does he possess great battle prowess, enough to challenge those stronger than him, but his vitality is extremely tenacious as well. He must be someone extraordinary in the outside world, but he must die today, the Vice City Lord Shueisha said. Chapter 27-25, finally breaking through. Everyone deeply agreed with what Shueisha had said. The entire upper echelon of the Dark Knight City had witnessed the battle prowess of this outsider, which made them all fearful. There were even some of them who had become slightly disturbed. They obviously wanted to kill him quickly and relieve themselves of this future problem. He was just a mid-god king, yet the 108 kings were required to deal with him. If he broke through to Late God King, probably even the powerhouse recognized publicly as the strongest in the Dark Knight City, by Jin, would not be his opponent. His strength had already struck fear into the hearts of some of the important figures of the city. To the other side, in the sky above Dark Knight City ravaged by energy, Jian Chen's wounds became more and more numerous. He had even been pierced all the way through a few times, from his chest to his back. Under the combined efforts of the Six Kings, his resistance became more and more powerless, while his vitality became weaker and weaker as well. He was like a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. Now, all of the cultivators within Dark Knight City, whether it were the small portion of the outsiders or the clansmen of the Darkstar race, paid close attention to the intense battle in the air from afar. Look, the outsider's going to lose. There'll only be death if you oppose our Darkstar race. The outsider really must be sick of living to come to our Darkstar city and make a mess. He well and truly deserves to die. Similar remarks were made in various places across the Dark Knight City. They did not even try to keep their voices down. They were all mocking the outsiders. Within a large courtyard in the city, a middle-aged man who seemed like a caretaker said to the dozen or so outsiders in front of him with his arms crossed, "As long as you outsiders play your roles as servants obediently among our Darkstar race, you obviously won't be mistreated. But if you even think of being impudent, that will be your fate." The middle-aged man pointed at the sky arrogantly. Yes. You don't have to worry at all, Sir Caretaker. We won't forget our statuses. We will do what we are supposed to do obediently. We won't cause you any issues, Sir Caretaker. The dozen or so outsiders were not exactly powerful. The strongest was only an early overgod. Lectured by the middle-aged man, all of them were servile. They would not even think about opposing him. Only once the middle-aged man had left would they be brave enough to gaze into the distance. They showed sympathy and regret, even some sorrow. The sorrow was similar to the feeling when an acquaintance died. A while later, the strongest among them, the over-god, said, "Let's go and work. With our strength, we won't be able to interfere with a battle on that level." These cultivators from the outside world seemed rather quiet. In this foreign land, especially where they would be harassed by the Darkstar race, they would feel a sense of familiarity and concern for every outsider they came across. Now that they saw that another member of their race was about to die in this battle against the experts of the Darkstar race, they all felt rather depressed. "Once I become a god king, I'll leave this damned place. I don't want to stay here any longer." Among them, a plump woman with a face covered in scars said. She was originally a woman of quite some beauty, but in order to protect herself better among the Darkstar race, she was forced to become like this. At the same time, in a corner within the Dark Knight City, an old man sat in an unremarkable inn and sipped on some alcohol. He was also an outsider, an early god king. Sigh. If the 100 Saints city still remained, our lives would be better, but now that it's been destroyed, we who come from the Saints world have nothing to rely on anymore. The old man sighed and shook his head. He seemed rather worried as he murmured, "This time, the city lord's estate has actually tasked me with hunting down a god king life-devouring beast, or I'll be in for trouble. But you can't just order me to kill a god king life-devouring beast and expect it to be done. It's just that the way out has already been sealed off by the Darkstar race. I can't even leave here when I want to. I just wonder how much longer this old life of mine can last here." The old man suddenly gazed in the direction of the battle and also showed pity. If the 100 Saints city still remained, it would be impossible for him to die. At least he won't die in Dark Knight City. But now, sigh. A heavy thud suddenly rang out from the sky. The Heavenly Fist King punched down, landing the attack on Jian Chen's chest and punching him out of the air. He struck the ground heavily. The sword splits yin and yang. The sword-wielding king also launched an attack, using a battle skill. The sword in his hand became several dozen meters long, falling with a mighty pressure. He planned on killing off Jian Chen with this one last attack. However, when the sword had only traveled halfway, the ground of the Dark Knight City suddenly shook and a powerful presence that belonged to a late god king erupted out. "Ha ha ha, so that's all the 108 kings of the Dark Knight City offer? You've mobilized 6 kings and you've failed to kill me, instead assisting me in breaking through." Jian Chen's voice rang out from the ground. Laws of strength that were several times greater than before condensed in the air. Oh no. The sword-wielding king, the Heavenly Fist King, the Dark Shadow King, the Swift Wind King, the Proud Ice King and the Earth-Quaking King all changed in expression. All of them became rather stern in that moment. He had actually broken through. Who would have thought that in this moment before death, the outsider had actually broken through? He was already so difficult to deal with as a mid-god king, so now that he had become a late god king, it would be unthinkable. At the same time, Bai Jin's expression suddenly changed within the city lord's estate. He became extremely solemn. Beside him, the expressions of the vice city lords and everyone else turned ugly as well. Swish. Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound rang out. A huge axe, wrapped in the laws of strength, flew out from the ground with lightning speed, colliding with the sword-wielding king's falling sword. Clang! The sword-wield king's sword produced a crisp sound as it was launched away like a rock. There was a tiny crack on its surface. Sensing the existence of the crack, the sword-wielding king was taken aback drastically. He was in disbelief. Due to the extraordinary quality of his sword, it was greater than most supreme quality saint artifacts despite also being a supreme quality saint artifact. It could be regarded as a half-god artifact. Even the city lord, Bai Jin, would struggle to leave a mark on the sword. But now, the sword had actually cracked from a single axe swing, which made him terrified. Jian Chen shot into the air like an arrow. He arrived before the sword-wielding king immediately and the laws of strength surged around his fist. His punch pierced through the air, flying towards the sword-wielding king's chest. Compared to before, both the speed and strength of his punch had become far, far greater. It tore through everything like a hot knife through batter, collapsing the protective light around the sword-wielding king, crushing his armor and caving in his chest. Spurt. Blood sprayed into the air from the sword-wielding king's mouth and his face immediately paled. He was launched away. Jianchen showed no mercy now that he had the upper hand. He strode through the air, catching up to the sword-wielding king in just 2 steps. He spread out his hand out into a palm, slamming it towards the sword-wielding king's head. The sword-wielding king used both hands to block in a hurry, but as soon as they made contact with Jianchen's hand, they were crushed. Jianchen's hand continued onwards without the slightest hindrance, landing on the sword-wielding king's head mercilessly. Yeah. Chapter 27-26, The Power to Destroy a City, Slam. With a crisp sound, the sword-wielding king's head exploded violently, as if Jianchen had just crushed a watermelon to pieces. The sword-wielding king of the 108 kings of Dark Night City had died. Having broken through to Late God King with the laws of strength, Jianchen seemed like he had stepped into a completely different realm. His battle prowess had increased by more than just several times over. It was on a completely different level compared to before. Before breaking through, he even struggled against the proud Ice King who was weaker than the sword-wielding king. Now that he did broken through, he dealt with the sword-wielding king effortlessly. Of course, the laws of strength was not the complete reason why he was able to achieve this. The most important reason was because he could now use a little more power from the chaotic body by using his breakthrough as a cover. He was able to challenge those at higher cultivation levels as a mid-god king, which had given the people of Dark Night City a deep impression of his extraordinary strength. Now that he had reached Late God King, it did seem reasonable for his performance to be even more extraordinary than before. Watching the sword-wielding king's corpse fall out of the sky, the proud Ice King, Heavenly Fist King, Earthquaking King, Swift Wind King and Dark Shadow King were all slightly stunned. All of them stared at the sword-wielding king's corpse in shock as disbelief flooded their eyes. The sword-wielding king's dead. That's impossible, impossible, the proud Ice King was at a loss. The sword-wielding king was definitely stronger than him, yet he had been slain right off the bat. This made his heart churn as he struggled to accept this reality. The outsider's only broken through to Late God King, so how has his strength increased by so much? The proud Ice King was unable to understand how Jianchen could be so much more powerful despite also being a Late God King. After all, the proud Ice King was among the best of the best among Late God Kings, one of the 108 kings of Dark Star City. Yet, against this outsider who had just broken through, he was actually so pitifully weak despite being one of the 108 kings, a status he took pride in. For that moment, the death of the sword-wielding king made the proud Ice King, Earthquaking King, Heavenly Fist King, Dark Shadow King and Swift Wind King stop their attacks. All of them had witnessed how the sword-wielding king had been easily struck down by Jianchen, unable to put up a fight at all. Jianchen's strength had made them rather fearful. They could not defeat this. They had stopped their attacks, but Jianchen had no plans to show them mercy. His gaze locked onto the weakest among them, the proud Ice King. The proud Ice King was the expert who had attacked him first. The proud Ice King's heart tightened for some reason when Jianchen looked over. When he saw Jianchen's icy cold gaze, teeming with killing intent, the proud Ice King's expression immediately changed in fright. In that moment, he lost all the pride and dignity that a king was supposed to possess. He lost his condescending aura from before as well. Instead, he became more like a stray dog, scurrying back to the city lord's estate without any interest to keep fighting. The proud Ice King had witnessed exactly how the sword-wielding king had died. Even someone as strong as the sword-wielding king could not withstand 3 attacks, so where would he find the courage to clash with Jianchen? Jianchen's gaze was cold. He did not tend to his wounds, so he remained covered in blood. He seemed just like a god of death who had emerged from hell. He took a step and immediately shot forward several hundred meters. At the same time, he punched out and surging laws of strength condensed from the air, smashing towards the proud Ice King. The punch seemed to break space, making the space there ripple, while the terrifying power in the punch seemed to pierce through space, directly landing on Proud Ice King's back, who had already fled to several hundred meters away. With another thud, terrifying power shook up the space there. The Proud Ice King's armor shattered as the laws of strength entered his body, tearing his organs to shred immediately. Even a part of his body had been crushed. The punch was just too powerful, so powerful that it could no longer be endured with a body of flesh. Even though these god kings no longer possessed bodies that were just flesh, they were still like paper before Jian Chen's laws of strength after breaking through. The Proud Ice King let out a grunt and his face immediately became sheet white. He fell out of the sky powerlessly like a broken kite. Jian Chen moved. His bloody, burly body shot off like a cannonball, producing booms as he tore through the air. He moved just too quickly. He arrived before the Proud Ice King in a single moment. He did not use any tricks, just raising his fist and throwing a simple punch at the Proud Ice King's head. It was a violent and brutal attack. No, the Proud Ice King roared out in despair. His despair was also filled with refusal to accept the current situation. He had just comprehended a god-tier battle skill and consolidated his position as one of the 108 kings. What awaited him in the future was fame and prestige, respect and glory. He refused to just die like this. However, there was no longer anything he could do against Jian Chen's brutal punch. Jian Chen's punch fell and so did the Proud Ice King. It had only been 5 seconds since Jian Chen broke through in those desperate straits, yet the Dark Knight City had lost the sword-wielding king and Proud Ice King. The two kings had been slain so quickly that many people in Dark Knight City had yet to return to their senses. Only when Jian Chen attacked the third king, the Heavenly Fist King, did the various spectators in the distance realize what had happened, immediately leading to an uproar. The people of the Dark Star race all showed fear. The deaths of the two kings pained them. It was sorrowful. At the same time, it made them feel like the sky had collapsed. As for the few outsiders, all of them roused with excitement, beaming with joy. All of them were forced to behave submissively in the Dark Star world, frequently harassed by the Dark Star race. Now that a companion of theirs from the same world had shown off his great powers, cleanly killing two great kings, all of them were overjoyed. 108 kings of the Dark Knight City, kill this person immediately. At the same time, Bai Jin's frigid voice boomed out from the city lord's estate. His resolute voice demonstrated his determination for Jian Chen to be dead. Against such a powerful outsider, their Dark Star race had to kill him off completely even if they needed to mobilize an entire city. This had already crossed the Dark Star race's absolute bottom line of tolerance for outsiders. Even before Bai Jin had passed down his order, the kings hidden in various places within the Dark Knight City had already begun moving. They all emerged. At the same time, all 36 lords of Dark Knight City appeared as well. All of them surged with power, brimming with killing intent, gathering in the city lord's estate. This person is much stronger than we imagined him to be. If we send the 108 kings to deal with him, it'll come at a great cost even if we achieve victory in the end. City Lord, the 36 of us should move as well, a young man among the 36 lords said. He had never been as stern before, clearly having witnessed the battle earlier through the senses of his soul. The sword-wielding king and Proud Ice King are already dead, so the formation of the 100 kings can no longer be used. The 36 lords should cast down the heaven's net formation. That's the only way to minimize our losses when killing him, said a beautiful woman in black among the 36 lords. Chapter 27:27, The Power to Destroy a City, 2. The 36 lords had all witnessed exactly how Jian Chen slew the sword-wielding king and Proud Ice King. His strength struck fear into the hearts of the 36 lords, the people responsible for protecting Dark Knight City. The 36 lords surpassed the 108 kings in both ranking and status, but all of them knew that in terms of strength, they were not exactly better than the 108 kings. At least, a crushing difference in strength would never appear between them. As a matter of fact, there were a select few among the 108 kings who were no weaker than the 36 lords in battle prowess. With the powerful attacks of the laws of the sword-wielding king had just barely made it into the ranks of these stronger kings. Even the sword-wielding king, who was not much weaker than them, had died so quickly. If it was a lord instead, they would probably just last a few more blows at most. In other words, the outsider was so powerful that any single lord would experience a crushing defeat if they faced against him alone. Bai Jin clearly understood this. After nodding, he immediately PSSSED down orders for the remaining kings to keep Jian Chen busy, while the 36 lords would immediately cast down the heaven's net formation in the outskirts of the city. A total of 106 peak god kings clashed with Jian Chen high above Dark Night City. The deafening booms constantly rang out as the powerful energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings, forming violent shockwaves that gushed out. When these shockwaves reached the city below, many structures collapsed. Countless simple yet ancient buildings were reduced to ruins. The formations that protected these structures were unable to withstand such power. Dark Night City had already been reduced to a mess. Many cultivators of the Darkstar race fled from the city in fright, as if it was the end of the world. In a corner of Dark Night City, the old male god king who had been drinking in an inn was now standing on a rooftop. He held a flask in his hand as he watched Jian Chen fight off the god kings. His heart surged. Clack! A flask fell out from his hand and smashed to pieces. The alcohol within soaked his cloth shoes, but he paid no attention to it at all. He only stared into the distance in utter shock. W. Who is this person? H. He's actually so powerful. I. Is he the successor of a Grand Exalt? The old man murmured subconsciously. In his understanding, probably only the successor of a Grand Exalt could demonstrate such impossible battle prowess, even though he had never seen the successor of a Grand Exalt. At this moment, there was a startling explosion in the distance. The god-tier battle skill from one of the kings had been nullified as powerful pulses of energy swept into the distance, pushing the old man back. With every step that he stumbled, he left behind a deep footprint in the ground. The old man was now several dozen kilometers away from the battle. The Darkstar race has been disgraced in this battle. Once the battle ends, the Darkstar race will probably target us outsiders with even more prejudice. I can no longer remain in Dark Night City. The old man hesitated. After a moment of internal conflict, he turned around and flew away from the city. To the other side, the battle drew closer and closer to the city lord's estate while everyone revolved around Jian Chen. The battle between him and the 106 kings had reached great intensity. They fought with everything that they had. The kings of the Dark Night City did not hold back at all against someone as powerful as Jian Chen. They unleashed everything they had. Various powerful secret techniques and god-tier battle skills illuminated the sky, letting loose earth-shaking power. In a time like that, they could no longer afford to pay attention to the city below. It no longer mattered if the city was destroyed, because all of them understood that killing Jian Chen was the greatest priority, more important than anything else. If they let someone like him live, allowing him to remain within the Darkstar race, the threat he would pose to the race would be just too great. Jian Chen became more vicious as the battle went on. Wrapped in the laws of strength, every swing of his two-handed axe was brutal, making the air boom. Every single swing could send a powerful expert flying. None of the kings could endure a strike of his axe. If it were not for all the people working together and keeping him busy, preventing him from launching consecutive attacks against the same person, they probably would have all been dead now. Damn it. If the proud Ice King and sword-wielding king were still alive, how would this outsider would still be alive? The deaths of the two kings prevent us from using the formation of the 100 kings. Otherwise, killing this person would have been as simple as crushing an ant, the kings that battled Jian Chen called out. Many of them had been sent flying by a single axe swing from Jian Chen, which vexed and aggrieved them, considering how great their statuses were. Arg! At this moment, a miserable cry rang out. The supreme quality saint artifact spear in a king's hand had been cut in half by Jian Chen's axe. The axe continued onwards, striking his chest with absolute strength. However, his cry only lasted for a single moment before vanishing. The laws of strength channeled into his body directly crushed his soul, killing him off. The third king was dead. Destruction Spear King. Many kings cried out in the surroundings. Three kings behind Jian Chen directly launched a sneak attack against him. Three supreme quality saint artifacts stabbed towards Jian Chen's head and heart with powerful pulses of energy. The axe in Jian Chen's hand moved with his body. With a sudden turn, his axe swung around and clashed with the three supreme quality saint artifacts. He remained where he was, unaffected, while the three kings stumbled backwards due to the great force. However, just when Jian Chen had repelled the three kings, a sword silently appeared behind him like a venomous snake, thrusting out like a bolt of lightning. A figure flashed behind him. This was the Dark Shadow King. He turned into a phantom shadow, concealing his presence and hiding in space to launch a sudden attack. Jian Chen sneered. He did not turn around. Instead, he reached backwards and grabbed the sword, which was followed by a swing of his axe. Spurt. The Dark Shadow King failed to dodge the swing. He was cut in half and his soul failed to escape either. He was killed off. The fourth king was dead. Following the Dark Shadow King, more kings died one after another. The 7th. The 8th. The 9th. The 13th. In just a short while, 20 kings had died one after another. With the death of so many kings, the remaining kings felt cold all over. They were in fear. The outsider was just too powerful, so powerful that he was basically a deviant. Many of the kings had developed fear for him after fighting for so long. Yet, the heaven's net formation from the 36 lords had still not been completed. Suddenly, the entire sky lit up. A bright streak of light shot out from the city lord's estate, appearing and vanishing in a flash like a bolt of lightning. It arrived before Jian Chen in a single moment. Sharp sword intent swept through the surroundings, forming something akin to an invisible prison that kept Jian Chen trapped. The attack had the power to freeze a region. The city lord of Dark Knight City, Biyao, had taken action. As soon as he launched an attack, earth-shaking might would follow. Sword chi filled the surroundings, just as if a lord had descended upon his domain. Chapter 27-28, The Power to Destroy a City, 3. Engulfed by Baijian's sword technique, Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed and his gaze immediately landed on Baijian. He was surprised. His laws of the sword had already reached sword immortal and he had comprehended the ultimate way of the sword, so his understanding of the laws of the sword were at an extremely profound level. As a result, as soon as Baijian launched an attack, Jian Chen managed to gain a complete grasp over the laws of the sword he had unleashed, giving him a complete sense over Baijian's full strength. He could not help but recall a supreme god king he had met back in the Neptunian divine palace by the name of Zhu Wen. Zhu Wen was an extremely renowned god king within the saints' world. He was so powerful that he ranked second on the god king's throne back then, only below Qing Shan. He was a god king with the battle prowess of an infinite prime of the first heavenly layer. The strength that Baijian currently displayed was much greater than what Zhu Wen possessed in the Neptunian divine palace. Only Qing Shan, who held first place, would have been able to overpower Baijian. Baijian's participation consoled the kings who encircled Jian Chen. Many of them let out a breath of relief, all retreating to a certain distance away instinctively to leave enough space for Baijian and Jian Chen. In the eyes of the 108 kings, the city lord Baijian's strength could only be described as unfathomable. Whether it was the 108 kings or the 36 lords, Baijian represented absolute authority to them. They could be described as on his beck and call. No one dared to challenge Baijian's authority. The city lord's comprehension of the laws of the sword seems to have increased yet again. Looks like the city lord is only an inch away from the primordial realm. The city lord should only need a step to reach the primordial realm, or maybe that's just half a step now. Sensing the might of Baijian's attack, many of the kings were secretly surprised. However, they understood that even if Baijian was half a step away from the primordial realm, he had yet to truly reach the primordial realm. Overcoming this barrier completely was as difficult as climbing the sky. It was thousands of times more difficult for them compared to outsiders. Boom! Suddenly, a startling explosion interrupted everyone's thoughts. Afterwards, a powerful storm of energy swept out, shaking up the kings uncontrollably. Jian Chen's huge axe had already collided with Bai Jin's sword. The sharp sword qi and the axe's laws of strength engaged in an intense clash. Jian Chen's laws of strength finally demonstrated signs of defeat, dispersed by Bai Jin's sword qi. However, Bai Jin's entire right arm had become numb as well, while the webbing between his thumb and index which he used to hold his sword ached. But in the next moment, he erupted with soaring light. The light was so powerful that it stabbed into the sky, reaching an altitude of several thousand meters. From afar, he seemed like a huge sword that connected the earth with the sky. Under the glorious light, he directly swung his sword at Jian Chen. Immediately, the pressure of the world came flooding over. The huge streak of light swept through the sky, as if it was splitting the earth and the sky apart. Bai Jin's attack already possessed the might of the first heavenly layer of infinite prime. Jian Chen seemed like he was under great threat. He let out a furious roar and his entire body swelled. The laws of the strength in the surroundings gathered over violently, which he then erupted with his full strength, suddenly throwing his huge axe into the air. Boom! When the two-handed axe approached the streak of light from Bai Jin, it exploded violently. Bai Jin's attack that could rival first heavenly layer infinite primes rapidly weakened under the storm of energy created by the exploding axe. However, the destruction of a supreme quality saint artifact was still not enough to nullify the attack completely. The residual light slashed down on Jian Chen's head, leaving behind a small, bloody mark on the center of his forehead. Of course, the wound had been purposefully created by Jian Chen, or in other words, he had created it where Bai Jin's attack had landed using a strand of sword qi with the ultimate way of the sword. Otherwise, even second heavenly layer infinite primes would not be able to penetrate the defenses of his current chaotic body, let alone first heavenly layer infinite primes. With a flip of his hand, another huge axe appeared in Jian Chen's hand. While it was different in shape compared to the one before, it was still a supreme quality saint artifact. He had collected many space rings in the two world mountains and had obtained quite a few supreme quality saint artifacts. The axe-like weapons alone amounted to 5 or 6, so running out of a suitable weapon was not an issue. However, just when Jian Chen wanted to continue his offense against Bai Jin, his expression suddenly changed. He could sense that the 36 lords had already completed the preparation for the heaven's net formation. It was about to turn into a killing formation of significant power. There are a total of 144 spiritual veins below Dark Night City. The heaven's net formation actually connects with 36 of them from afar, forming a resonance of energy, allowing the formation to easily kill first heavenly layer infinite primes. Jian Chen understood everything with the senses of his soul. Whether it was the formation of the 100 kings that Bai Jin had mentioned in the city lord's estate earlier or the heaven's net formation, neither of them were able to escape his senses. However, the power of the heaven's net formation made him frown. Even though the formation was no different from child's play in his eyes, he was currently limited to his role of a late god king. It was already startling enough that he had the battle prowess to match Bai Jin. If a formation that could even kill infinite primes failed to deal with him, it would be going rather overboard. The formation will be completed in 5 seconds. I have to end this quickly, thought Jian Chen. His gaze locked onto Bai Jin's space ring. In the next moment, his vitality rapidly declined as the signs of weakness on his face grew heavier and heavier. Faint flames even appeared on his bulky body. The fire seemed to be the flames of life. As the intensity of the flames grew, his vitality became weaker and weaker. In exchange, a terrifying presence even greater than before emerged. Oh no, he's using a powerful secret technique at the cost of his own vitality. Be careful, everyone. We can't let him escape at a time like this, a king called out. Immediately, all of the kings moved, guarding every single direction. They all knew the heaven's net formation was about to be completed. At such a crucial moment, they could not let the outsider escape. Bai Jin remained the same as before. The sword in his hand trembled, forming a net of swords that enveloped Jian Chen. He had already made up his mind. Regardless of the outsider's decision, whether he was going to fight with his life on the line or flee, he needed to make this person remain here. He had to prevent him from escaping out of the heaven's net formation. There's still 5 more seconds before the heaven's net formation is complete. You'll be dead for sure this time, thought Biyao. However, his expression changed drastically then and there. A sense of danger that had not appeared before suddenly surged in his heart. What he saw was a huge axe blade swinging towards him with great might and lightning speed. Sword technique of severing ways. Biyao reacted extremely quickly. With a bellow, he unleashed a god-tier battle skill. A startling strand of sword chi collided with the axe, producing a great boom. However, that was still not enough. The axe cut through Bijao's god-tier battle skill and landed on his right shoulder with its remaining force, cutting off his entire right arm. Biyao grunted and watched his arm fall out of the sky. He immediately panicked, because there was a space ring on his right arm. He could not afford to lose the ring. Just when he wanted to catch his falling arm, Jianchen suddenly appeared and grabbed the arm in a single stroke, before retreating without the slightest hesitation. No, damn it, give me back my arm. Biyao was no longer able to remain composed like before. He was furious, charging off in the direction which Jianchen had vanished off to without the slightest care in the world. He called out urgently at the same time, the space rings with him. Don't let him escape. Chapter 27-29. Lured into the two-world mountains, the kings in the surroundings were all stunned. Their eyes became subconsciously glued to Bijao's severed arm, filled with shock. But afterwards, they realized what the consequences of losing Bijao's space ring was, which made their countenance change. Now, it was not just Biyao anymore. The faces of the remaining kings and the 36 lords who were close to completing the heaven's net formation all became twisted, filled with worry and panic. They understood the value of Bijao's space ring just too well, not because of the resources it was holding, but because the droplet of the divine beast's essence blood from the Dark Star Emperor had stored in there. The droplet of essence blood played a crucial role in increasing the success rate of the great ceremony. They could not afford to lose it, or they would have essentially wronged the entire race once the great ceremony was effected. If that really did happen, their own deaths would instead become insignificant, because their clans or even the people close to them would be dragged into the matter as well. In conclusion, losing the droplet of essence blood came with extremely severe consequences. Stop him, block his path. Don't let him leave the city. With that, all of the kings were thrown into a panic. The vice city lords and members of the upper echelon who had yet to interfere inside the city lord's estate panicked as well. All of them flew out from the city lord's estate, pursuing Jianchen as quickly as they could. The vice city lord Shueisha's voice rang out far and wide, God kings of the Dark Night City, stop that person no matter what. If anyone disobeys, you will not be forgiven. You will be executed without mercy. Shueisha immediately passed an absolute order, commanding the entire city using his authority as a vice city lord. Some of the god kings who had no idea what had happened exactly were stunned by his command. Many of them even wondered whether they were hallucinating or not. Wasn't it just dealing with an outsider? Even if the outsider was powerful, was there a need to rile up everyone? Not only did he mobilize all the god kings in the city, those who did not take action would be executed mercilessly as well. We god kings possess a certain level of status within the race no matter what. Shueisha might be a vice city lord, but since when did vice city lords possess such great authority, enough to control our lives? Yeah. It's not like we've done anything wrong. Let alone Shueisha, even city lord Biyao does not have the authority to control our lives. Who does Shueisha think he is? Shueisha's order immediately infuriated many god kings. All of them refused to accept what he had said. They all resented Shueisha very much. Despite that, there were still many god kings that rushed into the sky, flying towards Jianchen fearlessly as they gave off powerful presences. Activate. At the same time, the 36 lords all became extremely stern. They roared out together and the heaven's net formation that was still a second from completion had been activated prematurely. All of their faces rapidly paled. Blood even spurted from some of their mouths. Activating the heaven's net formation prematurely took quite a toll on them. An extremely violent pulse of energy suddenly appeared from under the Dark Night City. Large amounts of energy surged from the 36 spiritual veins hidden underground, forming 36 huge pillars of energy that rushed into the sky, fusing with the 36 lords. Every single lord seemed to be enveloped by one of these streaks of light, which made them seem like gods descending from heaven, possessing infinite might. Afterwards, a huge barrier of energy rapidly expanded through the sky from the 36 lords, encapsulating the entire city. Wherever the barrier enveloped, the space seemed to freeze, while the abundant origin energy seized up as well. The barrier of energy possessed a special power. It could freeze whatever it passed by. Jianshan recognized the strength of the barrier with a single glance. It was so powerful that even first heavenly layer infinite primes would struggle to smash through it. Moreover, he knew that the barrier was just the beginning to the heaven's net formation. As the heaven's net formation continued to operate, even more powerful killing formations would appear. This formation could do much more than trap first heavenly layer infinite primes. It could kill them as well. The barrier of energy expanded and descended extremely quickly, enveloping the entire city. Jianshan was making his way out of the city right now, but he was still within the city. And many god kings of the Dark Star race had appeared in his path to stop him. However, after breaking through, even the 108 kings struggled to endure a single strike from him, let alone regular god kings. He swung his axe furiously and knocked away many god kings. Many high-quality saint artifacts were destroyed by a swing of his axe, scattered as fragments. Battle cries filled the air. Shueisha had gathered all the god kings in the city to stop Jianshan, but he still failed to slow Jianshan down. As a matter of fact, he failed to slow his steps even in the slightest. The difference in strength was just too great. Faster, faster. Bai Jin could not help but panic as he watched Jianshan get closer and closer to leaving the city. He yelled at the 36 lords in the formation. The 36 lords were in a state of urgency as well. However, they were in the heaven's net formation, so they were immobilized. All they could do was remain where they were and control the formation, so the barrier could fall a little faster. However, all of their efforts were bound to be wasted, because they were not up against a true late god king, but a primordial realm expert who had been hiding his strength the entire time. Jianshan moved faster and faster. Just as the barrier of energy was about to lock down the entire city, his speed suddenly erupted. His burly body cut through the air with a series of booms, shooting through the sky like a bolt of lightning. He basically brushed past the barrier when he rushed out of the city. Bai Jin was filled with regret. He was so close to stopping the outsider. However, now that it had developed like this, there was nothing he could do, because the heaven's net formation could only be used within the city. It required the spiritual veins deep underground to maintain its operation. Pursue him. Bai Jin ordered as he grit his teeth, leading the remaining kings to hunt down Jianshan. Behind, the 36 lords were filled with pity and regret as well. They dispersed the formation helplessly and followed Bai Jin in the pursuit. Shueisha and the other vice city lords did not just stand around either. They mobilized the god kings in the city, personally leading them in pursuit. Immediately, swathes of god kings left the Dark Night City, amounting to 70 to 80% of the total. As a result, the strength of the Dark Night City experienced an unprecedented low. Many cultivators in the city were stunned by this sight. They watched the black swathe of people glide through the air. The cultivators were left in a state of shock. After leaving the Dark Night City, Jianshan shot off with lightning speed, flying towards the Two-World Mountain. Bai Jin's space ring had already ended up in his hands. However, when he sent the senses of his soul into the space ring and discovered Sacred Feather's droplet of essence blood that was contaminated by the presence of the Dark Star race, his expression became as cold as ice. He looked back at the people in pursuit and heavy killing intent filled his eyes. He thought, "You're even going to follow me? Fantastic, just what I wanted. Once we enter the Two-World Mountains, it will be time for you to die." Chapter 27:30, You're at the Primordial Realm? A shocking pursuit unfolded between the Dark Night City and the Two-World Mountains. In the front, a burly man covered in blood fled desperately with a huge axe as blood sprayed from his mouth from time to time. His vitality was extremely weak, such that he seemed to be severely injured, as if he was already on his last breath, unable to last much longer. Behind, a total of several thousand Darkstar race god kings pursued relentlessly. All of them erupted with their presences, giving off startling killing intent. Gathered together, their activity was earth-shaking, which led to an extremely spectacular sight. All of the outsiders and members of the Darkstar race who happened upon this as they traveled were left stunned in utter shock. Heavens, what on earth is happening? There's so many god kings from my race who seem to be chasing a cultivator from outside. This is just crazy. The person at the front seems to be the city lord of the Dark Knight City. He's one of the strongest god kings in our race in this day and age. But look at the city lord's arms. Someone seems to have cut one off. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. One of the invincible god kings of the Darkstar race, the city lord of the Dark Knight City Biyao, is actually missing an arm. Look at him lead all those god kings in pursuit of the outsider. Did the outsider cut off his arm? How can that be possible? The city lord is basically invincible among god kings. Only the lords of other cities can match him. Don't tell me the person who cut off city lord Bijao's arm is a primordial realm expert. While the Dark Knight City was the city closest to the two world mountains, it was still quite a distance away. They would obviously come across a few cultivators along the way. There were many cultivators, both foreign and Darkstar race, which led to quite an uproar. At the same time, the news of the city lord of Dark Knight City leading several thousand god kings in pursuit of an outsider spread like wildfire. It spread like a viral infection, reaching the nearby cities very soon, creating a huge disturbance. Obviously, no one believed a rumor like this in the very beginning. The invincible strength of the 36 city lords of the Darkstar race had already been well established in the minds of people. Even if they were god kings, they were invincible god kings. There was not a single outsider that had the right for them to personally take action, let alone for something as absurd as a city lord leading several thousand god kings in pursuit of a single person to happen. However, there just happened to be some people of the Darkstar race who had used items like memory crystals to record it down. When Biyao and the stump of his arm was vividly displayed, when the scene of several thousand god kings behind him hunting down a single outsider in such an aggressive manner was clearly presented, everyone could not help but believe this preposterous rumor. These cities who learned about this first were immediately taken aback in shock. Afterwards, the news spread even faster, reaching the other cities through teleportation formations. The startling news of the Dark Knight City was currently spreading across the entire Darkstar race rapidly. To the other side, Jianshan rapidly fled in the direction of the two world mountains in a desperate manner. Behind him, the city lord Biyao, the remaining 108 kings, the 36 lords and the many god kings formed a long line in the sky as they chased after Jianshan. City lord, this person's constantly burning his essence blood to unleash greater speeds at the cost of his own vitality. He's already run out of strength. He can't last much longer. We have to take back the space ring, the vice city lords could not help but add when they saw Jianshan slow down evidently as they followed behind Biyao. Biyao nodded his head. He also could tell that the fleeing outsider was becoming slower and slower, while his presence was growing weaker and weaker too. He obviously knew what that entailed. The outsider could not last much longer. However, just as they drew closer, Jianshan suddenly bellowed out in front like he had used some secret technique. His burly body immediately began to wither, as if he was squeezing out the final bit of potential and life from his body. He actually sped up significantly. God damn it. Biyao could not help but curse inside when he saw this. He felt both frantic and resentful. They were getting closer and closer to the two world mountains now. The two world mountains suppressed them just too much. Once people of the Darkstar race entered the two world mountains, even if they were peak god kings, the strength they could unleash would be suppressed to mid-god king. We have to stop him before he enters the two world mountains. Biyao gritted his teeth as his face darkened from anger. All the god kings behind him nodded, locking onto Jian Chen with their eyes. However, they failed to catch up to Jian Chen in the end. They only saw Jian Chen dive into the mist of the Two World Mountains with his heavily injured body that had become as thin as a stick, before gradually making his way further away. It'll be troublesome now. We actually let him escape into the Two World Mountains. Outside the mountains, the Vice City Lord Si Wuqing's countenance warped. The Two World Mountains had always been a forbidden zone to the Darkstar race. None of them would set foot in there unless they had absolutely no other choice. All of them held deep fear for the Two World Mountains. Bai Jin hovered in the air as he looked at the Two World Mountains shrouded in mist. He said sternly, "There's no need to worry too much." He must have used up the last shred of his strength to escape into the Two World Mountains. He no longer possesses his peak battle prowess in his current state. We just need to catch up to him and we can still kill him effortlessly. Let's go. Enter the Two World Mountains with me. With that, Bai Jin entered the vicinity of the Two World Mountains first, stepping into the mist. As soon as Jian Chen had entered the mountains, he slowed down. He stopped after just traveling a few dozen kilometers. Afterwards, all the exhaustion on his face vanished, while his paleness was rapidly replaced by a healthy glow. He was brimming with energy, as fit as a fiddle. He did not seem to be heavily injured at all. With a slight shudder, he shook off all of the blood on his body, revealing his bronze skin. He maintained his appearance as a burly man, but all of his wounds had already vanished. There was not even a single scar left behind. Let alone scars, there was not even a mark. A few seconds later, Bai Jin's group shot over with lightning speed, finally arriving before Jian Chen. However, when they saw Jian Chen's current appearance, all of their expressions changed. They were in disbelief. "Why you?" Bai Jin stared at the unscathed Jian Chen with widened eyes. Even with his mental fortitude, he was stunned by this. He could only stutter. Jian Chen looked at the space ring in his hand. With a gesture from his finger, the essence blood of a divine beast drifted out from the space ring. He looked at the altered essence blood in sorrow. He murmured, "I originally had no ill feelings for you Darkstar race. I was originally willing to avoid all contact with your Darkstar race, but you just had to touch someone you should not have. You have forced me into making certain decisions." "Sir, who are you? Are you a primordial realm expert?" The city lord struggled to suppress his shock. He could tell with a single glance that the person before him was an outsider. A primordial realm expert had actually entered the Darkstar world from outside. This made his heart surge as he struggled to calm himself. Despite his shock, he still managed to communicate secretly to the people at the very back that a primordial realm expert had entered from outside. This matter had to be reported back to the race as quickly as possible. Among the Darkstar race, they even forbid the existence of late God King outsiders, so primordial realm experts would go without saying. After hearing Bai Jin's message, the crowd at the back immediately experienced a disturbance. Afterwards, people immediately turned around and fled in fear and surprise. Chapter 2731, Spatial Barrier, Attack. Keep him busy. At the same time, Bai Jin bellowed out and surged with light. He unleashed everything he had, turning into a sword and launching himself at Jian Chen. Although he was missing his right arm, he was still an invincible God King after all. In the Saints' world, he definitely would be no weaker than infinite primes of the first heavenly layer. As a result, even without his right arm, he could still unleash great power. Beside him, the vice leaders, 36 lords and 108 kings all bellowed out as well. All of them attacked Jian Chen with utmost determination, charging forward bravely. Not a single one of them cowered. At a time like this, they could not afford to take a single step back. If they lost the divine beast's essence blood for good, their fates would be extremely miserable even if they managed to escape here alive. They would be spit on and cursed by the entire clan, having wronged the entire clan. They would be better off dead. At least they could preserve their illustrious names if they fell here in battle. Of course, what mattered the most was making time for the people at the back, so they could escape and spread the news of a primordial realm outsider. When Bai Jin moved, Jian Chen became phased. He could not help but look at the sky. His senses were extremely sharp. He could clearly sense a profound, mysterious power suppressed by Jin from the surroundings, like a set of chains that wrapped around Bai Jin firmly, preventing him from using his full strength. The will of the grand exalt of the wood spirits? Jian Chen immediately thought of that. The conversation between Bai Jin and the others had not escaped his senses. Even when they communicated secretly, Jian Chen eavesdropped on every single aspect of it, which was why he knew the two world mountains would restrain the Dark Star race. However, he never imagined that the restraint would be so powerful. They had only just traveled a few dozen kilometers into the mountain's vicinity. Compared to how large the mountain range was, they could not even be considered as reaching the outskirts of the mountains. Just by stepping into its boundary, the people of the Dark Star race had been restrained by such an obvious amount. Once they had entered the mountains properly, or even ventured into the depths, just how terrifying would the suppression be? Just as Jian Chen sank into his thoughts, Bai Jin had arrived before Jian Chen in the form of a shining sword. However, just when the sword was about to stab into Jian Chen, space suddenly rippled and an intangible spatial barrier appeared silently, blocking the attack. Even though Bai Jin's strength was suppressed, he had only set foot in the vicinity of the two world mountains after all. The suppression was not particularly powerful, which was why his strength was not drastically affected even though he was still weakened. The battle prowess he could unleash was still very great, but he was unable to penetrate the spatial barrier. He was not the only one. Even the 36 lords and 108 kings right behind him only managed to make the barrier ripple when their attacks landed on it. The thin barrier to them was like a steel wall to a mortal. It was immovable. The laws of space. Bai Jin's face paled and despair appeared in his eyes. With his insight, he could obviously tell that the laws of space were at the primordial realm. Just a thin spatial barrier was enough to make him helpless. Of course, that was not the most terrifying part. What truly despaired him was that any attempt to flee before an expert who had comprehended the laws of space would be a ridiculous joke. He instinctively glanced backwards and just as expected, a spatial barrier had appeared at the very back of the group as well, blocking all the god kings who were trying to flee. There had already been many god kings who had attacked the spatial barrier with their full strength. However, even when they used their most powerful secret techniques and battle skills, they failed to even shake the spatial barrier. As a matter of fact, there were even people who had begun blowing up high-quality and supreme-quality saint artifacts. However, even these powerful attacks would only make the spatial barrier ripple. They were nowhere close to destroying it. Everyone scatter. Escape around it. The range of the spatial barrier must be limited, a god king of the Dark Star race called out from behind. As a result, the god kings all scattered, choosing different directions to flee in. In the next moment, everyone became despaired, because they discovered the spatial barrier was circular. It had already enveloped an entire region, cutting them off from the rest of the world. All of them were trapped. Bai Jin, the 36 lords and the 108 kings all stopped their attacks. Only until then did they truly understand just how powerful the outsider was. Just a single spatial barrier from him had made them powerless. It was impossible for them to oppose a person like him. Looking at Jian Chen, who seemed to turn a blind eye to all of this, the faces of the 36 lords and 108 kings were overcome by fury and regret, as well as some undisguised shock. This was the first time they had heard of and seen a primordial realm expert from outside. They understood the restrictions of entry to this world very well. They could not be older than 1,000 years. These people had all used countless years to reach god kings, but now that they discovered a primordial realm expert who was less than 1,000 years old, they were deeply shocked by his cultivation speed. Now, Bai Jin had completely calmed down. He looked at the droplet of essence blood hovered in Jian Chen's palm and thought of what Jian Chen had just said. Bai Jin's expression became agonized. He asked sternly, "Sir, have you come specially for the divine beast?" "That's right. The divine beast you've captured is like family to me. I just never thought that your Dark Star race would treat him like this." As soon as Sacred Feather was mentioned, Jian Chen's expression became frigid. Killing intent poured from him without the slightest disguise. His gaze landed on Bai Jin and he asked coldly, "Let me ask you. Do all 36 cities of your Darkstar race possess a droplet of essence blood? Is this important?" "No, it's not important anymore. I must admit that you are very powerful and you've probably reached the primordial realm a long time ago, but it's impossible if you want to save the divine beast from our hands, because infinite primes number to several dozen within our race. The 10 Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters are all experts who have reached the primordial realm a long time ago. Compared to you, they are much more powerful. Let me give you a word of advice. You better leave here before the upper echelon of my race discover you, or all of them will definitely be mobilized if they find out a primordial realm expert has set foot here and is trying to save the divine beast. You will be slain regardless of the consequences. The day of the great ceremony is coming. The upper echelon of my race will never allow even the slightest element of unpredictability to exist at such an important time," said Bai Jin. If it was possible, he hoped to convince the primordial realm expert into retreating. Otherwise, once a primordial realm expert managed to infiltrate the race, the great ceremony that controlled the fate of the entire race would probably be postponed indefinitely. Chapter 2732. Left to their own devices, Jian Chen stared at Bai Jin coldly. Even though Bai Jin did not go into detail, Jian Chen had confirmed his thoughts from his attitude and his reply. This immediately set his killing intent alit once more, surging violently in his heart. Great ceremony? You're still thinking about the great ceremony? You've harmed my family, so don't even think about completing the Darkstar race's great ceremony successfully, Jian Chen said coldly as his eyes shone brightly with killing intent. The Darkstar race was about to hold the great ceremony. This was a life-changing event to every single member of their race. Not only would they be able to break the limitation on cultivation, it was also one large step closer to leaving this prison. Any member of the Darkstar race would treat the great ceremony with the utmost importance. There were even some people who valued it more than their own lives. As a result, when they heard Jian Chen say he wanted to get in the way of the great ceremony, all of their expressions changed suddenly. The God Kings who originally feared and admired Jian Chen as a primordial realm expert leapt up in anger like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Their fear all vanished as they glared at him furiously. They all roared out viciously. "How dare you, outsider! How dare you get in the way of our great ceremony? The experts of my race will make you feel agony so horrendous that you would wish you were dead. Damned outsider, you really harboring ill motives. Our great emperor should have never let you outsiders into the territory of our race, where you run amok. Those outsiders holed up among my race should have been slaughtered a long time ago. Look at this, everyone. Look. These outsiders really don't hold any good intentions at all. They actually want to get in the way of our great ceremony. And he still wants to save that divine beast. To be able to sacrifice itself in our great ceremony, that's the greatest honor the divine beast will experience in its life." Jian Chen grew colder as he listened to these voices. He was like a piece of permafrost. "Sir, why don't you hear me out?" At this moment, Bai Jin raised his hand and silenced the voices behind him. He clasped his hands at Jian Chen. "Sir, with your cultivation at the primordial realm, you would be a major figure possessing great weight in my race, so why must you become enemies with us? If you're willing to take a step back, we're more than willing to forget our grievances and become friends with you. My race can also provide various, scarce resources to you. We even have the power to make you into a chaotic prime. But the most crucial part about this is that you have to abandon the divine beast. The divine beast directly affects the success rate of our great ceremony. It must be used as an offering." With that, Jian Chen sneered, "I'll be honest with you as well then. If the divine beast dies, I will annihilate the entire Darkstar race. Your entire race wishes to use the divine beast as an offering, in hopes of being able to break through to a higher cultivation realm. Then as for me, I'm also allowed to destroy your entire race for the sake of this divine beast, so you pay the price for your actions. Sir, must you become any enemy of our Darkstar race?" Bai Jin asked with a sunken expression. "Ha ha ha. Your race has captured my family and you want to put him to his death. I'm just saving my family, that's all, yet somehow I'm in the wrong. With that, Jianchen suddenly reached out at the empty space, and with that, the spatial barrier around him shrank. It went from 30 kilometers across to just 3, before shrinking again to 300 meters wide. Finally, as the spatial barrier shrank, the several thousand god kings trapped inside became squashed like pancakes, firmly pressed together such that they were immobilized. You've harmed my family. You will all pay the price. Since your Darkstar race has already extracted so much essence blood, I'll settle this part of the debt with you lot first, said Jianchen. He used his powers of space to trap the several thousand god kings, before taking them with him and flying into the depths of the two world mountains. What are you doing? Release us. As they watched Jianchen venture deeper into the two world mountains, some of the god kings cried out in absolute terror. It was as if the depths of the two world mountains were even more terrifying than dying by Jianchen's hands. He's taking us into this depths. This fiend of absolute wickedness. I curse him to a horrible death. We have to kill all the outsiders among our race. We have to kill them all. We can't spare any of them. Jianchen ignored their bellows. He hurried along with the laws of space, moving with startling speed. He would cross 10,000 kilometers with each passing moment, rapidly venturing into the depths of the two world mountains. The surrounding mist grew thicker and thicker. Along the way, he would leave behind a soul imprint from time to time, to prevent himself from getting lost after venturing too deeply inside. Very soon, Jianchen returned to the depths of the two world mountains. The journey that had taken Jin Hong and the others several months to complete only took Jianchen a few minutes. Is this the depths of the two world mountains? Bai Jin was pale and filled with despair, along with some shock and disbelief. This was because the outskirts of the two world mountains was tens of million kilometers away from the depths. The journey would be filled with danger as well, where the slightest carelessness would result in death. Even peak god kings needed over a month to cover such a large distance. But now, they had arrived in the depths in just a few minutes, which made Bai Jin feel like he was dreaming. It all seemed so surreal. After reaching the depths, Jianchen released the spatial restraints on the several thousand god kings. Without a single exception, all of them were sheet white as their eyes were filled with fear, because they had already recognized what this place was. The depths, it's the depths, some god kings babbled as their legs trembled. They were utterly terrified. In the depths of the two world mountains, the suppression was even greater. Some early god kings had actually been suppressed to the cultivation of overgods. Some mid-god kings had even been suppressed to peak overgod. Late god kings had fallen to early god king. Bai Jin, the 36 lords and the 108 kings were all experts who had reached peak god king many years ago. Now, the limit of their strength was mid-god king. In short, all of them had lost a minor realm of cultivation at the very least after setting foot in the depths. Whether you can survive now will all be up to you. If you can escape from here, then that's your fortune. Jianchen did not personally take action to kill them. Instead, he left behind that message and vanished. Basically, as soon as he had vanished, a series of beast roars rang out from deep within the mist. The ground began to shake as large herds of life-devouring beasts gathered over. And, it was not just from a single direction. The roars of life-devouring beasts appeared from all directions, their voices filled with excitement. The trembling ground only indicated the life-devouring beasts were getting closer and closer. Bai Jin seemed to think of something and immediately yelled at everyone, "Quick, quick, quick! Conceal your presence. Life-devouring beasts are extremely sensitive to our presence. We can't let any of it leak out. City Lord, what do we do? What else can we do? Run. Everyone, run. This is the depths of the two world mountains, a forbidden zone to us. We can't remain here unless we've reached the primordial realm. Escape outwards. Everyone escape outwards," Bai Jin said frantically, before immediately flying towards the outskirts of the mountains. Outsiders would struggle to find their way around in the depths of the Two World Mountains, but not the Dark Star race. After venturing deep enough here, all members of the Dark Star race would be able to sense the territory of the Dark Star world. Chapter 27:33. Venturing to the capital city, all of the God Kings fled frantically. They used everything they had to erupt with their full speed through various secret techniques. They were utterly terrified. The roars of beasts in the distance grew clearer and clearer. It formed a single stretch around them and was rang out with no end, shaking up the ground. Many life-devouring beasts were currently approaching them, making the ground tremble more and more violently. Jian Chen did not travel far. He sat down on the top of a huge tree several dozen kilometers away. His gaze was cold as he observed the God Kings emotionlessly. The depths of the Two World Mountains were filled with danger to others, but to him, he could move about however he wished. The only issue was the lack of a sense of direction, making it very easy to get lost in there and preventing him from finding his way out. He had expanded the senses of his soul a long time ago. Under his senses, he could clearly see countless life-devouring beasts forming a huge encirclement, closing upon the God Kings of the Dark Star race with countless rings. The size of the herd that these life-devouring beasts had formed was so large that it even surprised Jian Chen, someone who had remained in the depths for several months and had seen herds of all different sizes and shapes. The largest herds he had seen before only amounted to several tens of thousands, while just the life-devouring beasts in the range of his senses right now had reached 1,000,000. Who knew just how many more life-devouring beasts were gathering over here beyond the range of his senses? With everything he was seeing, Jian Chen actually developed a feeling that Bai Jin's group had already attracted over all the life-devouring beasts in the Two World Mountains. They were like a lantern in the dark. No matter how distant the life-devouring beasts were, they could all discover their existence. To think the grievances between the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirits and the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race would be so deep. They'd been dead for all this time, yet just the backup he left behind was still so hostile to the Dark Star race, thought Jian Chen. The life-devouring beasts were just too sensitive of the Dark Star race. A few life-devouring beasts beyond the range of his senses could accurately determine the location of these God Kings despite only being gods. This made no sense at all, so it had to do with the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirits. Arg! Save me! Save me! My legs! My legs are gone! Suddenly, a God King who flew along the ground cried out frantically and in fear. His legs currently vanished at a visible rate. As it dissipated, it turned into pure life force that merged with the ground below. There was no pain, no sensation at all. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would have never imagined his legs had already dissolved. Some of the God Kings in the surroundings saw this and felt a chill run down their spines. Their fear intensified and they fled faster and faster. As for the God King who had lost his legs, the dissolution reached his waist very soon and continued upwards, reaching his chest, then neck and head. In less than half a minute, a God King had been vaporized. His entire body turned into life force that fused into the ground below. There was nothing he could do apart from crying out in fear. He was not the only case. A total of several dozen God Kings had dissolved away completely. There were also a fraction of the God Kings that actually sprouted with roots. In the end, they turned into a huge plant rooted down in the ground, no longer possessing any humanoid characteristics anymore. Jian Chen sat on the top of the tree and witnessed all of these incidents. Towards the end, even he felt chills despite his mental fortitude. Only now did he truly understand just how terrifying the Two World Mountains were. Its horrors mainly targeted people of the Dark Star race and was instead much more tolerant to other beings. Of course, there was another phenomenon he discovered, which was that all the God Kings who had died were the weakest out of the group. The stronger they were, the more resistant they were to all of this. However, as time went on, various things happened to the slightly stronger God Kings as well, but regardless of what happened, none of them managed to avoid death. By Jin, the 36 lords and the 108 kings were at the very front. What received them was a blanket of life-devouring beasts. With their insignificant size, they were swallowed up by the wave of colossal life-devouring beasts very soon. In the end, as the encirclement grew smaller and smaller, all of the god kings there became trapped. After a desperate struggle, all of them died here in the end, including Biyao. Compared to the outsiders, members of the Darkstar race would not leave behind any corpses when they died within the Two World Mountains. Even if they had not been eaten, they would assimilate into the ground, becoming nourishment to the ground. After all the members of the Darkstar race had died, the life-devouring beasts gathered their targets and all dispersed, returning to where they had come from. Jianshan watched it all unfold from the top of the tree. The senses of his soul locked onto each and every member of the Darkstar race. Only when he confirmed that all of them were dead did he stand up on the tree. He looked at the space ring with the droplet of essence blood and sank into his thoughts. A while later, he made up his mind and he vanished. When he reappeared, he was already near the territory of a primordial realm life-devouring beast. He used the mask to hide his presence. He did not set foot in the territory of the life-devouring beast either. He opened his hand slowly and Biyao space ring rested in it quietly. In the next moment, the space near his hand rippled slightly and the space ring immediately vanished. 100 kilometers away, a colossal life-devouring beast lay on the ground and snored away, giving off a tremendous presence. At this moment, the space 10 kilometers away from it twisted slightly and a space ring appeared out of nowhere. It landed below a large tree silently. The life-devouring beast seemed to sense something and raised its head to look around. It was in suspicion, but it failed to discover anything in the end, crouching back down and going back to sleep. Jianshan did not take the droplet of Sacred Feather's essence blood with him, because the essence blood had already been contaminated with the presence of the Darkstar world. He could not be certain whether the experts of the Darkstar race could locate it using some secret technique, which was why he left it there. He did not touch anything else in Bijao's space ring either. The untouched space ring just lay beside the primordial realm life-devouring beast, so even if experts of the Darkstar race came here after finding it somehow, they would probably just think Biyao had died to the life-devouring beast. Jianshan left the Two World Mountains. Using the soul imprints he had left behind when he came here, he returned to the territory of the Darkstar race easily. He could not use the identity of Guqi any longer. He changed his identity and entered another major city of the Darkstar race whilst maintaining an extremely low profile, using the teleportation formation and venturing to the capital city. The 10 divine halls and the imperial palace where the Darkstar Emperor resided were all in the capital city. He wanted to save Sacred Feather. All of the clues leading to Sacred Feather and any opportunities to save him would be in the capital city. Chapter 2734, A damaged high-quality god artifact. When Jianshan reached the capital city of the Darkstar race through the teleportation formation, a whole day had already passed since the storm in Dark Night City. A day was enough for what happened there to spread across the entire Darkstar race. The Darkstar race had ruled over the Darkstar world for just far too long, so long that basically everyone from the race had developed a sense of superiority when they faced outsiders. Moreover, this belief had already become firmly rooted, such that most members of the Darkstar race all looked down on outsiders. However, that was the reality as well. There were many primordial realm experts among the Darkstar race, while even mid-god kings were rare among the outsiders. This was why the outsiders all seemed like very weak existences of low status in the eyes of the Darkstar race. But now, just a single, subsedly weak outsider managed to upheave Dark Night City. Even the 108 kings who were equivalent to the guardian gods of Dark Night City suffered losses. This was obviously startling to the Darkstar race who had never suffered any setbacks before. As a result, after the news had spread, Dark Night City immediately became the center of attention. The various members of the Darkstar race residing in the other 35 cities all gathered in there through teleportation formations. Some of these people had come to watch the fun, some had gone to verify the matter and so on. In short, the population of the entire city had multiplied after the day of the incident. As for the city lord Biyao, the 36 lords, the 108 kings and the other experts, they had yet to return. A part of the walls collapsed and a large number of structures in the city have been destroyed as well. Never had I actually thought that the prosperous Dark Knight city of the past would be ruined like this. Dark Knight City is the city closest to the 100 Saint City. The 100 Saint City's been dedicated to the race under the orders of the 7th Hall Master, so all of the outsiders there have been slain. As for what happened here, it's probably revenge for what happened to the 100 Saint City. This might not necessarily be related to the 100 Saint City, because I heard the outsider who upheaved the Dark Knight City was alone. What? He's alone and he's bold enough to face off against an entire city? Surely not. If you don't believe me, you're more than welcome to ask the people of the Dark Knight City. Many people have witnessed this with their own eyes. Similar discussions were present everywhere throughout the streets of Dark Knight City, but without a single exception, everyone from the Darkstar race who learned about the battle struggled to believe the power of the outsider. He was able to hold his ground against the City Lord, the 36 Lords and the 108 Kings all by himself. Even though the outsider fled in the end, his strength was still utterly astounding. As a matter of fact, there were even people who suspected the outsider to be a primordial realm expert in disguise, but this theory was discarded after basically everyone in Dark Knight City denied this possibility. The City Lord's estate had already been sealed up, forbidding the entry of anyone. As for Caretaker Hong, who had remained behind in the estate, he actually became the person with the highest authority in the city now that all the entire upper echelon was gone. But currently, Caretaker Hong stood politely with his head lowered in front of 3 men dressed in black. The attire of the 3 men were exactly the same. Embroidered on their chests was a majestic, lifelike divine hall, and above it hovered 7 sharp swords. The divine hall held utmost glory among the Darkstar race, because it was the symbol of the 10 divine halls. Only people who served the 10 divine halls would possess an embroidery like that. As for the 7 swords above the divine hall, it represented they came from the 7th divine hall. The person in the center was the leader, while the other 2 were similar to followers or guards. The leader said, the 108 kings, 36 lords along with the city lord, Biyao, and the vice city lords all took action, yet they failed to stop the outsider from escaping. Caretaker Hong, are you certain the outsider's a god king and not at the primordial realm? Sir Special Envoy, the outsider is a god king. He even broke through to late god king in our Dark Knight City. Every person in the city was a witness of that, so it's impossible for him to be at the primordial realm. Moreover, primordial realm outsiders can't get in here, Caretaker Hong said carefully as he felt extremely nervous inside. Within Dark Knight City, he was just a caretaker that handled miscellaneous affairs at most, yet the special envoy of the Divine Hall standing right before him was an important figure that even Biyao had to treat courteously, so let alone him. He possesses such great battle prowess from just breaking through to late God King. What are the origins of this person? The envoy asked. Caretaker Hong shook his head, indicating that he did not know. The envoy frowned and said after some thought, "You know far too little. Seems like I'll have to wait for Biyao to return before I can learn anything more. Our race is currently going through a special period of time right now, so we can't afford any accidents to happen. Since the outsider's so powerful, we need to kill him." "Don't worry at all, sir. The city lords already led a group of experts to hunt him down. It's impossible for the outsider to escape. Perhaps he's already been slain by the city lord," said Caretaker Hong. He felt very unsettled, because he had personally witnessed Bijao's hand being cut off and the essence blood of the divine beast being stolen. He was afraid of telling this to the envoy. He could only pray inside and hope that Biyao could return with the essence blood. The envoy ended up waiting for a whole day. Biyao did not return even after such a long time, which made the envoy feel slightly uneasy. By now, the news of Biyao charging into the Two World Mountains with his group of god kings to hunt down an outsider had gradually reached the Dark Knight City as well. When the envoy received the news, his expression immediately changed slightly and he leapt to his feet. He was extremely stern. Bijao's actually entered the Two World Mountains and he hasn't returned after such a long time. Seems like he's probably encountered trouble. He's holding this is of utmost importance. We have to report to the Divine Hall immediately." The special envoy left in a hurry. In a fine establishment in the center of the capital city, Jianshan ordered some small dishes and sat by the window. He ate the dishes and drank some alcohol leisurely as he studied the imperial palace in the distance that hovered 1,000 meters in the air. The imperial palace was extremely grand and gave off the extremely heavy pressure of a god artifact. With Jianshan's insight, he could tell with a single glance that the imperial palace was actually a high-quality god artifact, a tough fortress that probably even grand primes would struggle to destroy. Jianshan was not surprised by the existence of a high-quality god artifact here. After all, the Darkstar race was a powerful race that had once given birth to a grand exalt. Even though they had declined, they still possessed some heritage. The only thing that made Jianshan rejoice was that the high-quality god artifact was no longer perfect. It had once experienced unbelievable damage and was still ruined right now. It did not even possess a tenth of a high-quality god artifact's power anymore. And he could clearly sense that the god artifact lacked an artifact spirit. Perhaps the artifact spirit had died a long time ago. Chapter 2735, The Seventh Hall Master, the Emperor of the Darkstar race is within the Imperial Palace. Although his cultivation remains at the 9th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime, his presence is so powerful that it's completely on par to 1st heavenly layer chaotic primes. Jianshan's eyes deepened as he gazed at the Imperial Palace. The high-quality god artifact Divine Hall was severely damaged, and coupled with the fact that the Darkstar Emperor never tried to keep his presence hidden, Jianshan was able to sense his presence even when seated in the establishment. Of course, not everyone could sense it like Jianshan, unless their senses were as powerful as his. As for him, he used the effects of the mask to hide himself completely. Unless there were grand primes who stood at the very peak, no one could see through him. The Darkstar Emperor really is powerful. I'm still not his opponent right now. Jianshan became slightly cautious. In the Darkstar race, the only existence he feared was the Darkstar Emperor. I can't sense Sacred Feather's presence. However, I'm certain he's in the Imperial Palace. He's so important to the Darkstar race that perhaps the Darkstar Emperor's watching over him personally. Jianshan felt some pity. However, he dared not to look through the Imperial Palace carelessly with the senses of his soul. If the Darkstar Emperor sensed him, saving Sacred Feather would instead become even more difficult. Afterwards, he looked below the Imperial Palace, at the 10 divine halls that also hovered in the air. The 10 divine halls were humongous. They all differed in appearance and were all low-quality god artifacts. They were also severely damaged, with their artifact spirits dead. They barely had any power remaining. Even without investigation, Jianshan knew the 10 divine halls were the 10 absolute existences only second to the Darkstar Emperor and the Darkstar race. The structure of authority in the Darkstar race was very simple. The Darkstar Emperor reigned on top as the paramount ruler, while below him were the 10 divine halls. The Darkstar Emperor normally did not manage anything, so the various matters in the Darkstar race were handled by the 10 divine halls below. As for the 10 divine halls, each of them would wield power for 1,000 years. This millennia just happened to be the 7th divine hall's turn. Below the 10 divine halls were the 36 cities. Under that were various small towns and villages. Suddenly, Jianshan's eyes narrowed and turned towards one of the divine halls. He saw a primordial realm expert of the Darkstar race emerge from the divine hall on the floating square in front. His face was frigid and he quickly made his way over to the teleportation formation with several dozen god kings. Afterwards, there was a flash of light and he had already departed this place. A 2nd heavenly layer Infinite Prime. He's left through the teleportation formation in such a hurry, so he should be going to the Dark Knight City, Jianshan thought. He looked at the Divine Hall. That should have been the Divine Hall currently in power, the 7th Divine Hall. The Imperial Palace was being watched over by the Darkstar Emperor, so Jianshan would never probe it so easily. However, there were no qualms with the 10 divine halls below. The senses of his soul extended over slowly, approaching the 7th divine hall. He was extremely careful. His soul had changed after fusing with the sliver of chaotic force. Under his purposeful concealment, it would be very difficult to discover his existence unless the disparity in strength was just too great. The 10 divine halls of the Darkstar race actually do not have any defensive measures like inscriptions or formations. Even the Imperial Palace does not appear to give off any energy pulses of formations. Seems like they've had it easy for far too long. But that's good too. It'll save me quite a lot of trouble, Jianshan rejoiced inside, but at a closer thought, it made sense. The Darkstar race was rigidly stratified and they were not under any external threat either. With the paramount status of the 10 divine halls and the Imperial Palace, was there anyone bold enough to snoop around with the senses of their souls? In such a safe environment, the outcome would be the same even if they had defensive formations. Moreover, the Darkstar world was not a complete world. It originated from a colossal beast. The production of the veins of energy were limited, so avoiding the use of formations would instead save some energy. The senses of Jian Chen's soul entered the 7th divine hall easily. Although there were no formations or inscriptions there, he could not afford to be careless even in the slightest. He carefully made his way deeper and also made preparations to pull out at any time. There were several tens of thousand people inside the 7th divine hall, ranging from gods to god-kings. They all had their own jobs, workers in perfect arrangement, responsible for recording and managing the various miscellaneous matters within the Darkstar race. In the depths of the divine hall, Jianshan sensed the pulses of the presence of 3 infinite primes. From the strength of the strongest, it should have reached the 6th heavenly layer of infinite prime, while the other 2 were at the 3rd and 4th heavenly layer. Coupled with the one that left earlier, the 7th divine hall already has 4 infinite primes, and I don't even know whether it's all of them. If all 10 divine halls are like this, the Darkstar race probably has close to 50 infinite primes, or even more. Jianshan became rather surprised by the calculation. With so many primordial realm experts gathered together, he had to avoid them as well. This was because the primordial realm experts here were different from the saints' world. Anyone who could reach the primordial realm in such an environment all possessed great willpower, great wisdom and great fortune. They were prodigies amongst prodigies, and they had remained at their current realms for an extremely long amount of time. If they were in the saints' world, any primordial realm expert of the Darkstar race could challenge those at higher cultivation levels. The 6th heavenly layer infinite prime should be the 7th hall master. I have to treat him like a 7th heavenly layer infinite prime from the saints' world at the very least, Jianshan thought and immediately became even more careful. As he ventured deeper, Jianshan captured the conversation between the 3 infinite primes. Please don't worry, Hall Master. Since Duff has already ventured to the Dark Knight's city personally, nothing will happen to the droplet of the divine beast's essence blood allocated there. Even if the city lord of Dark Knight's city, Bai Jin, has experienced a mishap and passed away in the 2-world mountains, Duff should be able to retrieve the droplet of essence blood with his strength, the 4th heavenly layer infinite prime said in the depths of the 7th divine hall. Jianshan could only hide his senses carefully by remaining far away, afraid of approaching them. As a result, he did not know how these people looked like. He could only capture their voices that had carried over. It'll be all fine and dandy if the essence blood really can be retrieved. But if it can't, how am I supposed to face the Emperor? Both of you know exactly how important the matters connected to the essence blood are. If something really does happen, Sai, the 7th hall master said sternly, with a tinge of worry. But soon afterwards, the 7th hall master seemed to think of something. He suddenly emitted an icy cold killing intent and his voice coldened as well. An outsider seems to be the perpetrator of everything that happened in the Dark Knight city. These outsiders have caused quite the problem for my race this time. Send orders to the 100 Saints city to execute all of imprisoned outsiders. Leave none alive, execute all of them. Hall Master, this doesn't seem too wise. After all, our race still needs to rely on them to supply us with some resources from the outside world, said the 3rd heavenly layer infinite prime. The day of the great ceremony is approaching. If we don't clean up the outsiders now, they'll definitely affect our great ceremony drastically. The Dark Knight city's the best example with what they've done. Although some of the resources from the outside world are crucial to our race, how can they compare to our great ceremony? the seventh Hall Master said coldly. Chapter 2736, The Land of Soul Destruction. Hall Master, the organizations in the 100 Saint City possess great status outside. Most of the valuable resources our race requires is under the control of these organizations. We've already established our might by taking the 100 Saint City, but if we execute all the prisoners, we will have offended these major organizations completely. If they stop providing our race with resources because of this, it'll be quite the impact, said the fourth heavenly layer Infinite Prime. His name was Enlai and he was a Vice Hall Master of the 7th Divine Hall. The third heavenly layer Vice Hall Master, K-Soul, said as well, Enlai's right. After all, the emperors personally permitted the existence of these outsiders. Hall Master, don't you think we should dash enough? However, before K-Soul could finish talking, he had been interrupted by the 7th Hall Master. The 7th Hall Master said in irritation, I've already made up my mind about this, so don't say anything more. Immediately order the people watching over the 100 Saint City to execute all outsiders imprisoned there. Leave none alive. Enlai and K-Soul looked at one another. They could see each other's powerlessness. The 7th Hall Master's prejudice towards the outsiders was just too deep. He wanted to use the great ceremony as an excuse this time to slaughter all the outsiders from the 100 Saint City. The two of them even suspected that if it were not for the Emperor personally permitting the existence of these outsiders, the 7th Hall Master might not have just dealt with the outsiders from the 100 Saint City. Probably all the outsiders in the entire Dark Star world would be facing a disaster. Oh right. Is there any news of Kun Tian recently? The 7th Hall Master asked suddenly, but when he mentioned Kun Tian's name, his gaze sharpened slightly. The 5th Hall Master hasn't appeared since he entered the land of soul destruction 3 years ago. He must still be in seclusion within the land of soul destruction in an attempt to achieve a breakthrough, said K-Soul. The 7th Hall Master immediately sneered with that, after reaching the primordial realm, every step forward for our Darkstar race is filled with difficulty, and if you want to break through, you have to go through countless trials. It's almost impossible for any breakthroughs to happen, let alone at such a high cultivation level, going from the 5th heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer. Kun Tian wants to break through to the 6th heavenly layer to rival me, but how can it just be that easy? And, he's entered the land of soul destruction. It's rumored that the land of soul destruction is a special zone formed by the planetary beast's brain after it died. It's filled with an extremely disorderly and brutal will. The disorderly will affect the soul severely. If you can't fend it off, even injuries to the soul will only be considered as a light consequence. It'll be bad once your consciousness is shaken up and you go crazy. And, the dangers of the land of soul destruction do not just lie with the disorderly will. What's even more powerful is the indestructible slivers of consciousness that the planetary beast left behind. Once you're being ravaged by the indestructible consciousness, even we primordial realm experts can die from the slightest carelessness. It's been 3 years since Kun Tian's left. Aside from our great emperor of extraordinary talent, no one's remained in the land of soul destruction for so long. Kun Tian, looks like you've really got the determination to cross the point of no return for the sake of your breakthrough to the 6th heavenly layer, sneered the 7th Hall Master in a slightly mocking manner. The senses of Jian Chen's soul remained in the 7th Divine Hall for a while, but even when the conversation ended, he had not heard any information about Sacred Feather. His senses quietly retreated from the 7th Divine Hall. Although he already knew the many cultivators imprisoned in the 100 Saint City would be under life-threatening danger, Jin Hong's group was close to leaving the Two World Mountains as well. However, the land of soul destruction that the 7th Hall Master mentioned did pique Jian Chen's interests. Kun Tian that the 7th Hall Master speaks of should be the 5th Hall Master. The 5th Hall Masters entered the land of soul destruction. The planetary beast's brain formed the land of soul destruction after it died. It's filled with the planetary beast's indestructible slivers of consciousness, which can threaten primordial realm experts. The planetary beast should be the colossal space beast that formed the Dark Star world. As he pondered, Jian Chen's eyes gradually lit up. If he wanted to save Sacred Feather, then he had to engage the Dark Star race in an open confrontation. A clash with them was unavoidable. If he could make the Dark Star race lose a few primordial realm experts before the battle had erupted, it would reduce his pressure slightly. The Land of Soul Destruction. A map immediately appeared in Jian Chen's head. The map clearly detailed the boundaries between the Two World Mountains and the Dark Star World. The Two World Mountains were blurry on the map, only an empty region without any detailed explanations. However, the geography of the Dark Star World was much clearer. The 36 major cities and the various smaller cities, towns, and villages were all labeled on there. Jian Chen had discovered the map detailing the entire Dark Star World in Bai Jin's space ring. Although he did not take anything from the space ring, he did memorize the map. He discovered the location of the Land of Soul Destruction very quickly, before leaving the capital city of the Dark Star race without any hesitation at all. The capital city was being watched over by the Dark Star Emperor. Not only would his movements be limited if he remained there, any benefits he could derive would be insignificant. He could not find out about too many things. As a result, he might as well go to the Land of Soul Destruction to search for the Fifth Hall Master. At least he would be able to do whatever he wanted there. Perhaps he might have even been able to force out some reliable information about Sacred Feather from the Fifth Hall Master. The Land of Soul Destruction was a zone of absolute danger in the Dark Star race. Rarely did anyone go there. Only members of the Dark Star race who were in urgent need of a breakthrough would take this risk in an attempt to benefit from the will that the planetary beast left behind. However, most of these people would end up remaining there for all of eternity, dead. Even among the few people who managed to make it out alive, their souls would be damaged and their minds would be in a mess, leaving behind incurable side effects of varying degrees. There were very few people who could actually benefit from the Land of Soul Destruction. They could be described as people who appeared once in 1,000 years. Several hours later, Jian Chen was already standing outside the Land of Soul Destruction. Looking over, the Land of Soul Destruction seemed a little like a valley that was surrounded by a chain of mountains. The surroundings of the Land of Soul Destruction were all huge mountains that reached into the clouds, forming a huge circular shape, enveloping the Land of Soul Destruction. The path of just several thousand meters wide right in front of him served as the only entrance into the Land of Soul Destruction. The Land of Soul Destruction was filled with chilly winds. The freezing billows slammed against the mountain rock, creating strange whistles and screams. Combined with the low, dark clouds that churned in the sky, it seemed like a place where demons danced. What a disorderly will. Standing at the entrance of the desolate Land of Soul Destruction, Jian Chen frowned and became extremely solemn. Even without entering the Land of Soul Destruction, he could already sense a powerful will that even threatened him. And, the further he ventured inside, the stronger this sense of threat would become. Chapter 2737, Kun Tian. At the entrance of the Land of Soul Destruction, Jian Chen hovered 1,000 meters in the air while giving off the presence of the Dark Star race. He disguised his strength as a late god king. He carefully studying the Land of Soul Destruction as he hovered in the air, before flying in through the entrance that spanned several thousand meters across. He did not move quickly. He moved steadily, maintaining his high degree of vigilance. He was strong enough to run around freely within the Dark Star race, where even if he encountered their greatest expert, the Dark Star Emperor, he had complete confidence in retreating unscathed. However, the Land of Soul Destruction was a still special place formed from the planetary beast's brain after all. Anything that a terrifying, colossal beast on par to 9th heavenly layer grand primes left behind could be life-threatening to infinite primes. Jian Chen was confident, but he could not afford to be careless even in the slightest within the Land of Soul Destruction. As he approached the Land of Soul Destruction, the chilly winds that swept through the place gradually reached Jian Chen as well. Jian Chen's mind immediately quivered as he felt cold from the bottom of his heart. The coldness pierced his soul. The souls of cultivators had no perception of heat, but in that moment, Jian Chen's soul truly felt a cold sensation. The chilly winds could directly affect the souls of cultivators, even including primordial realm experts. These chilly winds and the dark clouds in the surroundings are actually all a form of energy of the soul, or in other words, it's the slivers of consciousness and will the planetary beasts left behind with its death. Jian Chen grew cautious. He could sense that the depths of the land of soul destruction were even more dangerous than directly confronting the Dark Star Emperor, who was no weaker than a chaotic prime. Roar! Finally, Jian Shen flew into the land of soul destruction and formally set foot within this huge valley. However, a great beast's roar directly rang out in Jian Shen's soul, catching him off guard. The beast's roar was earth-shaking and extremely brutal, even containing the great power that could shake up the starry skies. It was like a bolt of lightning, directly erupting in Jian Chen's head with endless might. Jian Chen's levitating body immediately shuddered. His complexion changed rapidly and he immediately closed his eyes, using his full strength to gather the power of his soul and consolidate his mind. With the beast's roar, a colossal space beast, even larger than a star, condensed in Jian Chen's head. It was extremely blurry, like a ball of mist, impossible to make out any features. However, the tremendous pressure it gave off shook up Jian Chen's soul uncontrollably. This is something formed from the collapsed spiritual energy after the planetary beasts died. With Jian Chen's current knowledge, he recognized the constituents of the beast figure in a single glance. He felt shocked. He was still a primordial realm expert after all. He could endure a soul attack at such a degree, but if it had been a god king instead, even peak god king, they would have just ended up dead before the tremendous roar. He had just set foot in the land of soul destruction and he had endured such a powerful attack, which forced Jian Chen to reevaluate the dangers of the land of soul destruction. However, before Jian Chen had the time to make a response, the colossal figure in his head suddenly moved. A huge claw swung down from right above with the might that could subdue stars. Although the actual strength of the claw was nowhere close to being able to overwhelm stars, that was the endless might Jian Chen had truly sensed when the claw fell. This was the might the planetary beast possessed when it was still alive. Even though it was dead now, it could still deliver some of this might through the energy of its spirit. This was an unadorned soul attack, a blow to the mind. Jian Chen could only consolidate his mind and gather his soul, facing it in his toughest form. He was like a tiny tree seedling among raging winds. Against the winds, there was nothing the seedling could do apart from deeply embedding its roots into the earth to stabilize itself, letting the winds ravage itself freely. When the planetary beast's attack landed, Jian Chen's soul was violently shaken up. Even his soul that had mutated into something extraordinary felt piercing pain, followed by dizziness. With his soul under attack, his consciousness momentarily blurred, but in that moment, his perception of the outside world plunged completely. Fortunately, he was not fighting someone, or the consequences would be unimaginable. Jian Chen was alarmed. He had only just set foot in the land of soul destruction and he had already experienced such a violent soul attack. The dangers of the land of soul destruction completely exceeded his expectations. This was because this entirely were soul attacks. Before these attacks, the defenses of his chaotic body were completely useless. A soul attack like this shouldn't last too long, or it's impossible for the Fifth Hall Master Kun Tian to remain here for 3 years with his strength. Let alone 3 years, even half a year is impossible, Jian Chen thought. Holding on to that thought, he lasted for an entire hour like this. During that hour, the attacks his soul experienced did not weaken at all. Instead, they gradually became stronger, while the planetary beast in his head used attacks of various types against him as well. At times, it would take the form of a colossal beast, and at others, it would assume various human forms, or even dangers that could appear in outer space. These human figures all originated from the fragmented memories of the planetary beast, while Jian Chen found the blurry dangers of outer space to be chilling. In just an hour, I've used up around half of the power of my soul. Just how did the Fifth Hall Master last 3 years here? This isn't right. Jian Chen endured the soul attacks of the land of soul destruction strenuously as he began to look around. Very soon, he discovered something. The further away from the ground, the denser the will and slivers of consciousness from the planetary beast would be. The opposite was true as well. Jian Chen immediately descended, dropping from 1,000 meters to 500, and he instantly saw results. The attacks on his soul weakened drastically and he eased up. I see. Jian came to an understanding and cursed himself for his confusion. He immediately landed on the ground and found a safe place to recover the power of his soul. In the land of soul destruction, he could meet the fifth hall master Kun Tian at any time, so he needed to maintain his peak condition at all times. Just as Jian recovered the power of his soul, a figure sat on a boulder that was as smooth as a mirror several million kilometers away. He was a middle-aged man. His countenance was determined and cold as he gave off the presence of a primordial realm expert. He was the fifth hall master, Kun Tian. But right now, Kun Tian's face was rather twisted. The primordial realm presence he gave off fluctuated with great instability, sometimes strong and sometimes weak, sometimes brutal and sometimes violent. Arg! Suddenly, Kun Tian stood up. His eyes snapped open, revealing a faint smear of redness and craziness. He roared at the sky and the great sound wave reverberated through the surroundings, causing the dark clouds formed from the spiritual energy of the planetary beast to surge violently. He punched the boulder he sat on and the brutal force smashed it to pieces. Afterwards, he seemed to go insane, roaring out furiously as he constantly struck the ground with his hands. The muscles on his face twisted, like he was in pain. Chapter 2738, Loss of Memory. The fifth hall master had remained in the land of soul destruction for 3 years. He was desperate for a breakthrough, so rushed headfirst into danger, wanting to forcefully fuse with a sliver of the spiritual energy the planetary beast left behind, which deeply affected his mind in the end. His mind was stuck in an intense conflict with the spiritual energy of the planetary beast, reducing him to such a mad state. And his power was unstable. His energy that belonged to the fifth heavenly layer of infinite prime fluctuated violently in his body, surging like boiling water. Although the power belonged to the fifth heavenly layer, it was much more powerful than most fifth heavenly layer infinite primes of the saints' world. This was because the power was just too pure. It seemed to be highly concentrated essence, without the slightest impurity. It would take an extremely long amount of bitter cultivation to refine energy to such a level. This length would probably be measured in the tens of millions of years. Arg! Kun Tian roared out constantly. He slammed the ground with his hands crazily at times and clutched his head as he rolled on the ground at others. He seemed to be in great pain. His pain lasted for a total of 6 hours before seemingly reaching the limit he could endure. He produced a thunderous roar at the sky and all of his energy seemed to lose control. A violent energy that belonged to the fifth heavenly layer, or even on par to some sixth heavenly layer infinite primes, erupted from his body, sweeping through the land of soul destruction as a powerful storm. As the violent energy swept through the land of soul destruction, the entire place seemed to surge like the raging seas, producing startling waves. It was utterly earth-shaking. Even the slivers of consciousness that filled the place became abnormally active. After venting out like that, the fifth hall master gradually calmed down from his violent state. The madness in his eyes gradually faded away as his pulsating energy slowly settled down. Afterwards, he tottered and just collapsed on the ground, as if he had fallen unconscious. Of course, he was not dead. His life force did not weaken at all, instead gradually strengthening. Even his presence strengthened bit by bit. Jian, who sat near the entrance to recover the power of his soul, snapped open his eyes. He seemed to sense something. His nonchalant gaze sharpened drastically in that moment as his eyes shone brightly. His gaze pierced through space, landing on the depths of the land of soul destruction. The presence of the primordial realms erupted up ahead. It's around the fifth heavenly layer of infinite prime. It must be the fifth hall master, Kun Tian, thought Jian. The land of soul destruction was filled with slivers of the planetary beast's consciousness. Once he released the senses of his soul, he would be clashing with these slivers of consciousness, so it was inconvenient for him to unleash the senses of his soul in the land of soul destruction. At the same time, under the influence of these slivers of consciousness, his senses in general had weakened drastically. Without these abilities, it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack for him to find someone in the land of soul destruction. But it was perfect now. Just when he worried about finding the fifth hall master, Kun Tian would actually create a disturbance like this for him, allowing Jian Chen to locate him immediately. Since I know his location, it'll be much easier to find him. There's no hurry. Fifth Hall Master, once my soul recovers, it will be the time for you to die. Heavy killing intent flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. The land of soul destruction was the perfect place for killing someone. Due to the special environment, it served as a natural barrier, severely suppressing any activity involving battles between primordial realm experts. He had no need to worry about making too great of a disturbance and alerting the capital city of the Darkstar race when he fought here. Perhaps I should find a way to draw out the other primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race and then kill them one by one. I've developed grievances with the Darkstar race already, so conflict is inevitable. If they lose a few primordial realm experts, it would instead reduce my pressure when saving Sacred Feather, Jian Chen thought. Another figure suddenly flashed through his head. That was the primordial realm expert who had emerged from the 7th Divine Hall and gone to the Dark Night City, Duff. If he killed him by surprise in the Two World Mountains, would he be able to push the responsibility of Duff's death onto the primordial realm life-devouring beasts within the Two World Mountains once more? As he thought, the power of Jian Chen's soul recovered even faster. In order to save time, he even took out some heavenly resources that specialized in recovering the power of the soul from his space ring and ingested them. Of course, none of these heavenly resources had reached the god tier. They were not particularly effective on primordial realm experts, but they were better than nothing. It could speed up the process slightly. Almost a day later, the power of Jian Chen's soul had recovered to 90% of his peak condition. Before it had completely recovered, he rushed off in the direction of the 5th Hall Master. Jian Chen flew 10 meters above the ground. The laws of space pulsed around him, so he moved extremely quickly, crossing 1,000 kilometers with each instant. He obviously found this speed slightly slow for someone who had grasped the laws of space. However, this was the land of soul destruction. It was a special place where the slivers of the planetary beast's consciousness affected everything. It was also filled with danger, so he had to travel carefully. Several millions of kilometers away, Kun Tian slowly woke up on the ground. He opened his eyes and looked at the gloomy sky shrouded in gray clouds. There was uncertainty in his eyes. He found the sky to be both familiar and unfamiliar. What is this place? Kun Tian slowly sat up. He scanned the surroundings with his eyes as his confusion deepened. He suddenly had no idea where this place was, but he just had a feeling that he was somewhat familiar with here. But soon afterwards, Kun Tian came to a realization and ravished with joy. He called out without the slightest care in the world, "I've broken through. I've actually broken through. I, Kun Tian, have finally broken free from the restraints of the 5th heavenly layer, formally reaching the 6th heavenly layer." Ha 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 ha. Kun Tian laughed aloud with his head tilted back. He was so elated that he danced around. He was in extremely high spirits. But suddenly, he seemed to realize something else. He quickly calmed down and he became confused. Kun Tian, Kun Tian. Who's Kun Tian? Why do I call myself Kun Tian? Am I Kun Tian? But why don't I remember it? Who am I? What's my name? Who am I? Just who am I exactly? Why am I here? And where is this place? I seem to know what this place is, but why can't I recall it? His joy from breaking through to the 6th heavenly layer was tossed aside in the blink of an eye. Kun Tian sat on the ground in some dejection as he smacked his head forcefully, thinking hard. He suddenly discovered that he was no longer certain who he was. Apart from knowing that he had broken through to the 6th heavenly layer which he had long yearned for, he could not remember anything else. Chapter 2739, Killing Kun Tian, 1. By now, Jian Chen had arrived here as well. He used the properties of the mask to disguise himself with the presence of the Darkstar race, and a black mask covered his face. Who knew what it was made of, but it could block out the senses of the soul. He did not hide himself. Walking on foot, he strided towards Kun Tian, who knelt on the ground. His pair of exposed eyes studied Kun Tian's current condition as they shone with a strange light. There's something wrong with Kun Tian. It seems like he's lost a part of his memories. Jian Chen was surprised. He had never been expecting this. He could obviously tell that Kun Tian had already broken through, formally reaching the 6th heavenly layer of infinite prime. This part did not surprise him. Kun Tian had sensed Jian Chen a long time ago as well. He discovered him to be a native of the world, but just too weak, only a mere peak god king, so he did not take him seriously. With his back to Jian Chen, he completely ignored Jian Chen as he continued to frown and think hard. He discovered that he had forgotten many things. Apart from knowing he had been constantly working hard to break through to the 6th heavenly layer, he was uncertain about everything else, including his own identity and name. He recalled as hard as he could in an attempt to remember some things, but no matter how he racked his brains, he could not recall anything apart from finding the landscape here hazy and unfamiliar, yet also familiar. Even the name he had just mentioned, Kun Tian, sounded unfamiliar and familiar simultaneously to him. Jian Chen stood 10 meters away from Kun Tian. He looked at Kun Tian, who ignored him as his eyes flashed. After some consideration, he said with a raspy voice, "Kun Tian, you really are injured. Looks like the Hall Master was right. You haven't been able to remain unscathed after remaining 3 years in the land of soul destruction." Kun Tian seized up. He did not pay any attention to Jian Chen originally, because his presence was only at peak God King. To a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime, he was no different from an ant. However, only when Jian Chen referred to him as Kun Tian did he finally take the ant-like clansman seriously. Kun Tian slowly stood up and straightened himself from his kneeling posture. He turned around and stared at the masked Jian Chen with a cold gaze. He frowned. "You know this Hall Master?" As soon as he said that, Kun Tian became uncertain and confused once again. He wondered to himself, "This Hall Master? Why do I refer to myself like that?" He thought hard, but even after quite a while, he discovered nothing. He had already forgotten everything. Perhaps many of his actions and ways of speaking were just ingrained in him. He had referred to himself as this Hall Master for many years, so even when he had forgotten everything, he still possessed much of the same reactions, speech, actions, bearing, and so on. Jian Chen's eyes shone. His senses were extremely sharp, so he noticed all of Kun Tian's reactions and expressions. He smiled gently. "Of course I know you. You're the master of the 5th hall of the 10 great divine halls of the Dark Star race, Kun Tian." Jian Chen paused before continuing. "It's like the Hall Master can see the future. He was certain something would happen to your cultivation within the 3 years you've remained in the land of soul destruction, or maybe you were dead already. By the looks of things now, you'll still be alive, but your soul is severely damaged such that you've lost your memories. You don't even know who you are anymore." As he said that, Jian Chen felt some pity. He originally wanted to extract some information about Sacred Feather from Kun Tian, but looking at his state now, let alone extracting information, Kun Tian did not even know who he was himself. The 5th Hall Master. Kun Tian. The 5th Hall Master. Kun Tian. Hearing what Jian Chen said, Kun Tian sank into his thoughts as he murmured to himself. Although he had not remembered anything, he found the 5th Divine Hall to be extremely familiar. Suddenly, Kun Tian looked at Jian Chen and his eyes shone brightly. "Who are you?" When he asked that, his gaze gradually sharpened. His dignified expression made his question seem absolute. He sensed killing intent, an extremely heavy killing intent that gave him an ill omen. It was impossible for the late God King, and before him to give off something like that. "All you have to know is that I've come to kill you. You don't need to know anything other than that." Since Kun Tian had already lost his memories and knew nothing anymore, Jian Chen obviously had no need to waste any words on him. He attacked resolutely as soon as he finished talking. His presence remained at peak God King, but when he struck out, he produced an earth-shaking disturbance. His body shone brilliantly as he became enveloped by light. He seemed like a miniature sun, dazzling and blinding. Jian Chen did not use any weapons. Against Kun Tian, who had broken through to the 6th heavenly layer, he needed to be able to use his full strength. There was not a single supreme quality saint artifact or half-god artifact that could withstand Kun Tian's attacks. He reached out in the empty air and a streak of resplendent light immediately condensed. As the light surged, it pulsed with enough power to phase a primordial realm expert. Just the streak of light he had casually condensed was much more powerful than a supreme quality saint artifact. Swish! The streak of light pierced through the air, moving extremely quickly, as if it had broken free from the restraints of time and space. It immediately arrived before Kun Tian, stabbing towards his soul. "You're not a god king, but at the primordial realm." Kun Tian cried out, and his expression changed drastically. The strength that this disguised primordial realm expert had erupted with utterly shocked him. Not only was the incoming sword chi startlingly fast, the power it contained gave him chills too. In that critical moment, Kun Tian's body shuddered gently and he immediately faded. The sword chi in Jian Chen's hand directly pierced Kun Tian's forehead. It pierced his head all the way through. However, Jian Chen's expression remained the same. His gaze was just as cold as before, filled with killing intent. With a thought, chaotic force immediately filled his entire body, unleashing his full defenses. Boom! It was also at that moment that Kun Tian, who had his head pierced, exploded completely. The tremendous energy formed a terrifying storm of destruction, swallowing Jian Chen. The might of the energy storm was not something an infinite prime who had just stepped into the 6th heavenly layer could unleash. It was completely on par to the full-powered strike of a peak 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. That was because the energy was just too pure. It had been highly concentrated without a single shred of impurity. In the saints' world, there was not a single primordial realm expert who could refine their energy to such purity. There was no more peace in the entirety of the land of soul destruction with Kun Tian's explosion. In the air, the dense, dark clouds surged violently, like a constantly transforming fiend's, brandishing its claws and teeth. The bone-chilling winds screamed sharply, like wailing ghosts, yet also like the roar of a colossal beast. Jian Chen's surroundings shone brightly within the storm of energy from Kun Tian's explosion. He protected himself with the laws of the sword as he stood unwavering. He slashed suddenly with the sword chi in his hand. With that slash, he seemed to bisect the world. The entire space had been cut in half by him. The raging storm of energy parted around him, without touching him at all. Jian Chen took a step, appearing thousands of meters away like he had teleported. The sword chi in his hand surged with light as he stabbed at the empty space in front of him. Chapter 2740, Killing Kun Tian, 2. Jian Chen had already seen through that Kun Tian himself had not exploded. Instead, he used some kind of secret technique to condense another body out of powerful energy. It was similar to a clone. However, the clone was extraordinary. When it self-destructed, it was so powerful that it was already equivalent to the full-powered strike of a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime. And as soon as the clone was created, Kun Tian had silently hidden himself in the space several thousand meters away, erasing his presence so he was completely concealed. He used the self-destruction of his clone to confuse the enemy, or even heavily injure them, while he could hide away and look for an opening to launch a killing strike at all times. It had to be mentioned that this was a highly effective killing method. If a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime from the saints' world faced this attack, it really was possible for Kun Tian to kill them off in a single strike. Even 6th heavenly layer infinite primes on par to Kun Tian could die from the slightest carelessness. However, his opponent just happened to be Jian Chen. With Jian Chen's laws of space, Kun Tian's attempt to hide in space without the laws of space was like trying to teach a fish how to swim to Jian Chen. Bang! With a heavy rumble, the space rippled violently like water. Jian Chen's stab forced out Kun Tian from the space there. Kun Tian was stern. He held a sword that was 3 fingers wide in his hand. The sword shone brightly as it gave off pulses of energy. However, he had been forced into a stagger by Jian Chen's attack. Although Jian Chen did not have the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, he was still stronger than Kuan Tian, who had just broken through to the 6th heavenly layer. Even when Kuan Tian's battle prowess was greater than most other 6th heavenly layer infinite primes from the Saints' world, he still lost the upper hand in a clash against Jianchen. Just who are you? Since when did our Dark Star race possess an expert like you? Kuan Tian growled, but as soon as he finished talking, he became confused. He could no longer recall what experts the Dark Star race possessed. Jianchen understood. He knew Kuan Tian had lost his memories and had forgotten many things, but he would always absent-mindedly mention some matters from before his memory loss. This was because some memories and impressions were just too deep, as if they were deeply embedded in his soul. Even if he had lost his memories on the surface, his subconsciousness would still remember them. Kuan Tian's memory loss won't last for too long. He only needs the slightest reminding and he'll probably recall it all, thought Jianchen. He glanced past the sword in Kuan Tian's hand and his heart immediately thumped. Kuan Tian's sword was a low-quality god artifact, an undamaged low-quality god artifact. He could tell from the laws of the sword around the sword that Kuan Tian also walked the way of the sword. Immediately, Jianchen's killing intent erupted like a volcano. In that moment, his intent to kill Kuan Tian became unprecedented. I have to kill you today. Jianchen was utterly determined. He said nothing as his gaze became icy. He condensed another strand of sword chi and attacked Kuan Tian again. The sword in Kuan Tian's hand immediately erupted with the might of a god artifact, also stabbing at Jianchen. The sword shone with dazzling light, cutting a thin crack in the space, while sword slashes began to pepper the tough ground beneath him. Jianchen sneered. He controlled space and disturbed the area between them. Kuan Tian's sword immediately slowed down, while Jianchen's sword chi suddenly erupted in speed. Kuan Tian's eyes narrowed, but he did not become flustered at all. A low-quality god artifact armor immediately covered his body. Jianchen's sword chi struck Kuan Tian's armor, but he failed to penetrate it. He only managed to knock Kuan Tian away. Seeing this, Jianchen could not help but frown. Kuan Tian was not weak, possessing the battle prowess of a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. Now that he was equipped with 2 god artifacts as well, both his offense and defense had increased further, only making him stronger. Killing him like this would take quite the effort. Of course, just Kuan Tian alone could not give him as much pressure as he experienced right now. Most importantly, he gained a further understanding of the strength of the 10 Hall Masters through Kuan Tian. If the 10 Hall Masters all possessed god artifacts, that would be bad news to him. Dark Star Imperial Technique, Sky Splitter. Suddenly, Kuan Tian bellowed out. The energy on him surged out violently and the might of a god-tier battle skill flooded the surroundings. He swung the sword in his hand overhead at Jianchen in the distance. Pressure filled the depths of the land of soul destruction. His sword fell with a destructive might, as if the entire sky was about to be cut in half by that slash. An invisible, restraining force appeared and Jianchen felt his body sink. Not only were his movements restricted, his presence had been completely locked onto as well. Given the situation, even if he fled this place with the laws of space, he would not be able to dodge the attack of the god-tier battle skill. Jianchen's expression remained the same, calm and composed. However, his eyes became scorching white in that instant, as if they were filled with endless sword chi. He used the will of the ultimate way of the sword. The power of the laws of the sword immediately surged, becoming even more powerful than before. However, Jianchen's expression became rather strange, because when he used the will of the ultimate way of the sword, he could actually vaguely sense the location of the might of the world from the god-tier battle skill. God-tier battle skills possessed the might of the world. This basically certified a god-tier battle skill to be a god-tier battle skill. Jianchen had experienced it many times before. But right now, when he used the will, it felt completely different from before. His senses of the world were even clearer and even more precise. In the past, he had viewed this might of the world as an embodiment of the laws and ways of the world. It was not just him either. Basically all cultivators held the same view. But right now, it had overturned his previous understanding of this might of the world. The might of the world was more like a form of will than an embodiment of laws or ways. It was a will that originated from the world. It was as if using a god-tier battle skill could gain the support of the will of the world. The will of the world? The world has a will as well? Or should I say, this is only because of the special circumstances in which the Darkstar world was formed that I get this mistaken impression? In that moment, Jianchen felt rather confused. However, this was the first time he had used the will of the ultimate way of the sword against a god-tier battle skill, so he was not certain whether it would be the same in the outside world. Moreover, having reached his current level of comprehension, his understanding of the world was much deeper than before. He clearly knew that in order to possess a will, there required thought. Wills could be described as a form of thought. The god-tier battle skill arrived extremely quickly. In that critical moment, Jianchen did not have much time to think at all. When he sensed the will of the world, he immediately turned his will of the ultimate way of the sword into an invisible sword, thrusting it over viciously. There were no ground-shaking disturbances, no violent eruptions or booms. All of it happened silently. When Jianchen stabbed out with his will, he felt like he had severed a thin, frail string. Afterwards, Kun Tian's god-tier battle skill seemed to lose the very core of its power, its might plummeting abruptly. In a single instant, it went from the god-tier battle skill from earlier to the most simple energy attack. Chapter 2741. Replaced an attack like that obviously posed no threat to Jianchen. Let alone a threat, it was not even enough for Jianchen to bat an eye. He nullified Kun Tian's attack by casually emitting a strand of sword chi. The god-tier battle skill Kun Tian used failed to create any waves in the battle at all. Kun Tian was stunned. He watched all of this unfold in disbelief. Although there were many things he had forgotten and completely responded with his instincts, he was still not an idiot after all. He could obviously sense just how startling his attack was. How could such a mighty god-tier battle skill only possess such insignificant power? How's that possible? It's impossible for my attack to be so weak. Why did it feel like it ran out of power towards the end? Kun Tian murmured. He was perplexed. Even after racking his brains, he was unable to understand what had happened. If the person before him had done something, he would sense it at the very least. However, he had sensed nothing at all. Jianchen's movements paused momentarily as well. The effects of the will of the ultimate way of the sword roused his excitement. He was basically ravishing with joy, because he discovered that it had not taken a particularly large toll on him to nullify the god-tier battle skill. At most, it would just cost him some power of his soul. A cost like that was basically insignificant to him. Never had I actually thought that god-tier battle skills are actually connected with the will of the world, and the connection would be so weak. A sharp sword condensed from my ultimate will can easily sever their connection. But, I wonder whether it's only effective against the one type of god-tier battle skill used by Kun Tian, or against all god-tier battle skills. If it can overwhelm all god-tier battle skills in this similar fashion, I'll have no need to fear god-tier battle skills at all when my battle with the primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race erupts. However, the Darkstar world is different from the Saints' world. One's a complete, major world created, naturally, while the other's a smaller world formed from a planetary beast. My ultimate will can destroy god-tier battle skills in the Darkstar world, but that doesn't mean I can do the same in the Saints' world. However, it's more than enough even if it's only in the Darkstar world. Jianchen thought quickly, already planning to find other primordial realm experts to test it on. Being effective against one god-tier battle skill did not mean it was effective against all god-tier battle skills. After all, there were various types of god-tier battle skills, so he still needed to experiment around. Have you been using tricks secretly? Kun Tian stared at Jianchen in surprise as he asked in doubt. Fortunately, he did not have his complete memory, or his heart would probably be churning right now. This was because almost all cultivators knew that nothing like this could happen to god-tier battle skills after they had been launched. It was impossible for them to be roaring with power one moment, suppressing the surroundings with the might of the world, before losing all of their power in the next moment, becoming the most ordinary attack. Clearly, Kun Tian refused to believe it. Energy surged from his body as he used another god-tier battle skill, Darkstar Imperial Technique, Void Destruction. Jianshan wanted to test whether his ultimate will was effective against other god-tier battle skills as well, so he was more than happy to see Kun Tian cast a second god-tier battle skill. As a sixth heavenly layer infinite prime, Kun Tian obviously used god-tier battle skills extremely quickly. He basically completed it instantly. Immediately, pressure flooded the surroundings and another god-tier battle skill condensed, crushing towards Jianshan with enough power to destroy everything. The god-tier battle skill this time was even more powerful than the last. A huge pedestal appeared in the air, radiating with heavy pressure. Wherever it passed by, space would shatter and turn into chaos. Jianshan's eyes shone extremely brightly. He had become restless a long time ago. With some eagerness and some urgency, he condensed an invisible sword once again and slashed with it. The pedestal condensed from the god-tier battle skill fell extremely quickly, but Jianshan's ultimate will was even faster. Following that vague feeling, the invisible sword severed the connection between the god-tier battle skill and the world once more. Immediately, the god-tier battle skill that was radiating with pressure and destructive power deflated like a balloon. All of its might vanished, turning the startling god-tier battle skill into the most simple energy attack. Impossible, it's impossible. This time, Kun Tian became completely speechless. It was possible that his initial failure originated from making a mistake somewhere during the process, but he had clearly been much more diligent when casting it the second time. He had used everything he had, yet the result was no different. As a result, he was left utterly perplexed despite racking his brain. This was because he could tell that Jianshan did nothing at all. His god-tier battle skill had just collapsed strangely. His god-tier battle skill was not the only thing that had collapsed. So had his confidence. After all, using a god-tier battle skill came at quite the cost. Casting god-tier battle skills twice and failing both times came with such a great cost that even a sixth heavenly layer infinite prime could not ignore. However, Jianshan's face was filled with joy. He had actually succeeded with the second time. He had succeeded twice, consecutively, which convinced him of the reality that his ultimate will could suppress god-tier battle skills. He no longer wasted any more time after this. He immediately attacked Kun Tian. Without any god-tier battle skills, Kun Tian's threat to Jianshan reduced once again. However, despite that, his battle prowess was still extremely great. Using his two god artifacts, he engaged in a battle of high intensity against Jianshan in the land of soul destruction. Jianshan was in no hurry to kill Kun Tian. Instead, he paid close attention to the way Kun Tian fought as well as the certain aspects he was skilled in. However, as the battle continued, he also discovered that his ultimate will was only effective against god-tier battle skills. It was useless against the secret techniques of the Darkstar race. Before long, Jianshan and Kun Tian had already been fighting for 4 hours. They had crossed tens of thousand kilometers in the meantime. The entire land of soul destruction churned with their battle. The lingering slivers of consciousness from the planetary beast wreaked havoc in the surroundings, rushing into their heads from time to time and bombarding their souls. Roar! Suddenly, Jianshan froze. A deafening roar exploded into his head, shaking up his soul like a candle flame in the wind. He had been attacked by the slivers of consciousness once again, and it was much more powerful than before. It caused his consciousness to blur for an instant. At the same time, he felt a sense of danger. Jianshan immediately retreated without second thought. The laws of space pulsed around him and he retreated to 100 meters away instantly like he had teleported. Basically in the moment Jianshan had vanished, a resplendent streak of light slashed over. It had basically brushed past his forehead. He had dodged it hazardously. Even though Jianshan had dodged it successfully, the sharp sword chi struck his body, making him feel like he was being stabbed by needles. The mask on his face shattered under the sword chi, revealing his hidden face. Looking at the somewhat familiar yet also extremely unfamiliar face, Kun Tian showed doubt. However, he still cried out subconsciously, "Duff, it's actually you." "Impossible, this is impossible. You're clearly just a second heavenly layer infinite prime. How did you become so powerful suddenly? Don't tell me you've been constantly hiding your strength these years?" Jian Chen's current appearance was not his own. Instead, it was the second heavenly layer infinite primes that he had seen in the Imperial City who left through the teleportation formation for Dark Knight City. The Duff in Kun Tian's eyes smiled strangely and said mysteriously, "Hall Master, there's no need for you to know so much." With that, the sword chi in Jian Chen's hand stabbed towards Kun Tian from afar. When he launched the attack, the sword chi along with part of his arm vanished, as if it had fused into the space there. Shadowless life-taking strike. Kun Tian suddenly shuddered, before immediately turning pale. His eyes widened, filled with disbelief, confusion, doubt and so on. A spurt of blood erupted from his mouth with pieces of his organs. All he felt was an extremely powerful strand of sword chi tearing through the defenses of his divine armor somehow, appearing silently in his body and directly erupting in there, destroying most of his vitality and instantly heavily injuring him. That was not all. The sword chi that had suddenly appeared in his body actually flowed upwards after shredding his organs, directly rushing towards the soul in his head. Wherever the sword chi passed by, his body would be reduced to a bloody mess. No. In that moment, the battle-seasoned Kun Tian became frantic. He even showed fear, because the sword chi was just too powerful and just too fast. He mobilized all the energy in his body to obstruct it, but the sword chi pierced through it all. Even when he wanted to do something else, the sword chi would be just too fast, so it was impossible for him to make it in time. Just as the sword chi was about to reach his soul, Kun Tian made up his mind with no other choice, immediately abandoning his body and emerging with his soul. He did not linger around afterwards, fleeing towards the entrance of the land of soul destruction as quickly as he could. Right now, he did not have any additional time to think. All of his reactions were based off his instincts. It was as if at a time like this, only a single path laid in front of him. This was the instinctive reaction embedded in the depths of his soul. "Look at how weak you've become after abandoning your body," Jian Chen sighed emotionally. Since Kun Tian had abandoned his body, only death would be waiting for him. Even if the Dark Star Emperor was here, he would not be able to save him. Let alone the Dark Star Emperor, even if Grand Primes were present, death awaited Kun Tian as long as his soul had not been protected by their power. "Destroy," Jian Chen said gently. He did not seem to do anything, but Kun Tian's soul that had already fled to several dozen kilometers away emitted a miserable shriek, before directly dispersing. Jian Chen's ultimate will envelop a region of 100,000 kilometers. In this range, he controlled the world, as if he was the absolute ruler there. With a single thought, he could determine the fates of countless god kings. That was because god kings could not oppose Jian Chen's will of the ultimate way of the sword. If Kun Tian's body remained, Jian Chen could do nothing to him with his ultimate will. However, he was so puny as a soul. Any god king could easily destroy his soul, so Jian Chen only needed to condense a strand of sword chi from the air with the power of his ultimate way of the sword to easily kill him. "Even if you die, I'll make you die in confusion." Jian Chen touched his face. He had obviously purposefully assumed Duff's identity for killing Kun Tian. He still did not have a complete understanding of the methods of the Dark Star race, so just in case, he had to take some precautions. Afterwards, Jian Chen arrived before Kun Tian's corpse and removed his armor and sword without any hesitation at all. Kun Tian's space ring obviously ended up on Jian Chen's finger as well. Jian Chen studied Kun Tian's appearance and stature carefully. Afterwards, his appearance changed once again. In just a few seconds, he had assumed Kun Tian's appearance. It was not just his appearance. Even his stature was exactly the same. He seemed identical to Kun Tian when he was alive, without the slightest flaw. After destroying the corpse and the traces of battle, Jianchen sat down on the spot to refine the armor and sword. He knew these two god artifacts were basically symbolic of Kuan Tian, so he needed to grasp them. Chapter 2742, finally out, these two god artifacts probably were repaired. All god artifacts possessed artifact spirits, but as Jianchen refined the two god artifacts, he failed to notice artifact spirits in any of them. And, after close examination, he discovered signs that the two god artifacts had been repaired. This immediately made him think of the divine hall that floated above the capital city of the Darkstar race in a ruined state. Doesn't the Darkstar race have any experts who can refine new god artifacts, or should I say they lack the materials to? Jianchen thought to himself, before soon laughing at himself. Why was he worrying about this? The Darkstar race did not have a single complete god artifact. That would only make things even better for him. He immediately dismissed his thoughts, focusing on refinement. Just as Jianchen refined the god artifacts in the land of soul destruction, a large group flew quickly at a low altitude within the mist-shrouded two-world mountains in the direction of the distant Dark Night City. They emerged from the shrouded depths of the two-world mountains to the outskirts where mist was visibly thinner. Their group was huge, amounting to several tens of thousand people. All of them pulsed with energy, forming energy barriers around themselves to protect themselves. These energies all shone with different colors depending on their cultivation methods. Blending together, it seemed like rainbow light. These people were the group of prodigies led by Jin Hong who had entered the two-world mountains from the Saints' world. As they moved out of the enshrouded region, the group seemed to notice something. Everyone stopped involuntarily, studying the surrounding region. The mists thinned. The mists thinned. We're out, we're finally out. Ha ha ha, we've finally passed through the depths of the two-world mountains. We've arrived in the outskirts. We've succeeded. We've successfully crossed the two-world mountains. In the next moment, many of the prodigies could not help but cry out their hearts. All of them were excited and extremely moved. They all felt like they had survived a disaster. Because they all knew that as long as they left the depths of the two-world mountains, they would be truly safe. God King life-devouring beasts would never appear in the outskirts of the two-world mountains. At most, they would just come across a peak-over-god life-devouring beast or two. And peak-over-god life-devouring beasts posed no threat at all to this colossal group of several tens of thousand god kings. We're finally out, Jin Hong could not help but exhale deeply at the very back of the group. His heart that had always been on edge for the past few months finally relaxed. Around him were He Qianqian of the Heavenly Crane clan, Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword sect, Guang Wanhua of the Scarlet Light clan, Sun Ji of the Sun clan, Ying Wujin of the Darkness clan and so on. All of them had eased up as well. Together with their delight, they felt like they had survived a disaster as well. Ha ha ha, we're just too powerful. We're just too impressive. We've actually made it through the two-world mountains. I originally thought it was impossible for us to make it out alive, but we've actually succeeded. Ha ha ha, the two-world mountains that can even make people pale has failed to stop us. We've completed an impossible mission. Once we return to our clans, our status will definitely rise with our achievements. This is the most impressive achievement in our lives. Even if we undergo tests in our clans, it'll increase our merit significantly. The prodigy of the Chu family, Chu Jia, Gong Rui's of the Gong family, Zhou Ji of the Yuqiong sect, Kong Feiying of the Sanqiong clan and so on immediately sat down where they were and laughed out loud. Earlier when they were still in the depths of the two-world mountains, they were so nervous that they were even afraid of breathing too loudly. Their fear had reached the limit. Now that they had reached the outskirts which were much safer, they were no longer afraid. They yelled out all of their emotions. However, what none of them knew about was that several dozen kilometers from them in the depths of the two-world mountains, a colossal eagle perched on the crown of a large tree. It gazed at the group of people from afar with its rather intelligent eyes. The tree which the huge eagle perched on swayed and trembled about extremely unnaturally, as if it struggled to endure the eagle's weight. But at a closer glance, that did not seem to be the case either. Not a single person in Jin Hong's group knew just how much help the huge eagle had provided to them during their last part of the journey through the depths. After Jian Shen had left the Two World Mountains, the huge eagle remained in the shadows as a deterrent for the last part of their journey out of gratitude. It had scared away many God King life-devouring beasts. That was why the journey had been so peaceful towards the end. The huge eagle stood on the crown of the tree and observed them quietly for a while, and only afterwards did it unfurl its wings and take off, vanishing into the thick mist in the blink of an eye. With the departure of the eagle, the tree it was standing on behaved like its life had been spared. Its roots unearthed from the ground, before heaving up its huge trunk. As if it had grown countless legs, the tree scrambled off into the distance in a panic. All of the prodigies and the sacrificial soldiers sat on the ground in the outskirts of the Two World Mountains, absorbing divine crystals to recover their energy. During the recovery process, Jin Hong set up arrangements rapidly. He created small squadrons of the sacrificial soldiers, sending them off in different directions for investigation among the Darkstar race. As for the majority, they were in no hurry to leave after they recovered their peak condition. Instead, they remained in the depths of the Two World Mountains, only 100 kilometers from the outskirts, waiting patiently. The people of the Darkstar race have their abilities suppressed when they enter the Two World Mountains, preventing them from using their full strength. They won't enter the Two World Mountains so easily. Meanwhile, the Two World Mountains affect us much less compared to them, so we can't afford to leave here before we gain reliable information regarding the 100 Saint City, Jin Hong said to everyone. No one had any objections regarding this. They all understood remaining there would benefit them. Afterwards, everyone just sat down and began meditating, waiting silently in the Two World Mountains. He Qianqian sat nearby. However, she was clearly rather uneasy. She would constantly check on a divine hall in her hand, while her gaze would always fall in the direction of the depths. She was worried. He Qianqian, is the sliver of power of Yang Yutian's soul still in the divine hall? At this moment, Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword sect suddenly looked over and asked solemnly. Ping Yixing's question drew over many gazes. Immediately, many prodigies looked over, their gazes stopping on the shrunken divine hall in He Kanakian's hand. Many of them understood that if Yang Yutian had not stepped forward courageously, sacrificing himself to draw away the late God King life-devouring beast, probably many of them would die in the Two World Mountains. It would be impossible for all of them to be alive right now. The gazes of the prodigies who had fallen out with Jian Shen, like Chu Jia, Gong Rui's, Kong Feiying, Zhou Ji and Zhao Wenbin, all coldened slightly. Chapter 2743, Internal Conflict. Chu Jia and the others all came from peak clans of the Saints' world. Even though they would not always be particularly important in the clan, such that some of them were not even direct descendants, they still possessed a natural sense of superiority. As a result, they just found an independent cultivator like Yang Yutian unpleasant to the eye. Yet in the end, the independent cultivator that they all looked down on had actually heavily injured them before so many people. This was obviously a huge insult to them, and with how arrogant they were and in their minds, this kind of humiliation had already transformed into utter hatred. This hatred had become on par to grievances of life and death. Now that they heard Yang Yutian's name again, killing intent was immediately set alight in the five of them. However, none of them said anything. They only gazed at He Qianqian, or more accurately, at the divine hall in He Qianqian's hands. He Qianqian frequently checked on the sliver of the power of Jian Chen's soul in the divine hall with the senses of her soul. She noticed their gazes and knew about their grievances with Jian Chen, so she immediately raised her guard. Only afterwards did she say to the people around her, the sliver of power of Yang Yutian's soul is still intact in the divine hall. He's still alive. He Qianqian spoke very gently, but everyone could still hear the worry and anticipation in her voice. Of course, everyone understood that it was not because He Qianqian was particularly concerned for Yang Yutian. This was only due to the strength that he had demonstrated. He had already reached a level that He Qianqian could no longer afford to ignore. If he returned, it would mean that the group from the Heavenly Crane clan would become a powerful existence only second to Jinhong. No one would be able to ignore this. The world of the fallen beast possessed many things that were in the interests of the clans behind them, so obviously the stronger their groups were, the more they could claim for their clans. Yang Yutian's still alive? That's fantastic. Looks like he's much stronger than I imagined him to be. Not only has he successfully escaped from a late God King life-devouring beast, he's even managed to survive in the dangerous depths of the Two World Mountains all alone until now. There's probably still a great battle to come within the Dark Star race. If we have an expert like Yang Yutian assisting us, the pressure we face will lessen. As soon as they heard Yang Yutian was still alive, Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword Sect, Sun Ji of the Sun family, Bai Zhanxiong of the 100 Battle Clan and the other prodigies who had a good impression of Jian Chen all beamed with joy. They were extremely delighted by the news. As for Chu Jie's group, their expressions all became ugly. Afterwards, Kong Feiying and Gong Rui's glanced at each other and Kong Feiying said nonchalantly, "He Qianqian, the Divine Hall's with you, so it's not like we can check on the situation in the Divine Hall. Whether Yang Yutian's still alive or not depends entirely on what you say. Why don't you give the Divine Hall to us so we can properly verify whether the sliver of the soul Yang Yutian left behind is actually still there or not?" Although he spoke with a peaceful tone, Kong Feiying and Gong Rui's immediately took action before He Qianqian could even answer. The two of them charged forward, one of them going straight for He Qianqian, while the other targeting the Divine Hall in He Qianqian's hand. Gong Rui's grabbed the Divine Hall and immediately destroyed the sliver of Yang Yutian's soul. Without it pinpointing our location, Yang Yutian will basically be blind in the depths of the Two World Mountains. He'll never be able to leave there. All that will be waiting for him is death. In that moment he moved, Kong Feiying said to Gong Ruai secretly. "Hee, don't worry. I know what to do. And it doesn't matter if I can't grab the Divine Hall either. As long as I can get close, I'll use my full strength to destroy the sliver of Yang Yutian's soul that he left there." Gong Ruai sniggered. "What are you doing?" He Qianqian had constantly remained wary of them. As soon as Gong Rui's and Kong Feiying moved, she reacted by immediately retreating. She was about to stow away the Divine Hall in her hands into her space ring as well. But at this moment, a speck of cold light suddenly appeared, arriving before He Qianqian in a single instant. From the corner of her eye, He Qianqian caught a glimpse of Chu Jie smirking strangely. Surprisingly, he held a black tube, as thick as a finger, in his hand, which surged with powerful ripples of energy. The speck of cold light had been launched by the finger-sized tube. At a closer glance, the speck of cold light was actually a needle condensed from concentrated energy. With lightning speed, the speck of cold light directly landed on the Divine Hall that He Qianqian had yet to stow away, immediately producing a violent explosion. The Divine Hall was blown out of He Qianqian's hand by the great force, flying off into the distance. "Chu Jie, I won't forget about this," He Qianqian cried out. She was extremely furious. Just when she wanted to grab the Divine Hall again, she became entangled with Kong Feiying who had just arrived. As for Gong Rui's, he moved like a bolt of lightning, directly charging towards the Divine Hall in the air. He pulsed with energy, about to pierce the Divine Hall with tremendous energy and disperse the sliver of the power of the soul that Yang Yutian left in there. "Don't you dare." However, Jinhong took action. With a flash, he arrived in front of Gong Rui's like he had teleported. He caught the flying Divine Hall with one hand easily as he directly threw a punch with the other towards Gong Rui's hand which reached towards the Divine Hall. Bang! The fist and palm collided, producing a heavy sound. Gong Rui's expression changed drastically as he grunted and was launched away by Jinhong's punch. He smashed through several trees along the way, before landing on the ground in a stagger. His face was bright red as he held down a mouthful of blood that had almost spurted out. "Jinhong, you've gotten in our way time and time again. Aren't you afraid of affecting our unity as a group?" The Divine Hall fell into Jinhong's hands and Kong Feiying also stopped attacking He Qianqian. He growled angrily as he looked at Jinhong with a sunken face. Although Jin Hong was the leader of this group and their seniors had all told them to follow Jin Hong, the seniors only implied to follow Jin Hong's orders for anything related to the Dark Star race. Their objective was for everyone to remain unified, so they could face the threat of the Dark Star race together. Right now, they were just targeting Jian Chen alone to settle a personal grievance. Jin Hong had no right to interfere with this. They were not ignoring their seniors' advice either. If it weren't for Yang Yutian who stepped forward and led the late God King life-devouring beast away, not all of you might have been able to make it out of the Two World Mountains. Just based on that, Yang Yutian has shown great kindness whether it's to you or to us. Now you've made it out of the depths, you immediately want to destroy the marker for Yang Yutian's path out. Won't you even think about how you'll tarnish your clan's reputations by doing something so ungrateful? Jin Hong held the divine hall and stood proudly, with a rather indomitable bearing as he said righteously. Chapter 2744, News. Gong Rui's, who had been blown away by a punch from Jin Hong, stood up with some difficulty. He wiped away the sliver of blood from the corner of his mouth and roared furiously at Jin Hong, "Jin Hong, stop spewing bullsh**. T. Who said we wanted to destroy the sliver of power from Yang Yutian's soul? We just wanted to confirm whether Yang Yutian had died in the depths of the Two World Mountains. Instead, you've injured me all of a sudden. Do you really think that our Gong family is that easy to walk over?" When he reached there, Gong Rui's entire presence suddenly changed. He suddenly looked behind him and yelled out, "Where are the sacrificial soldiers loyal to our Gong family?" With that, the presences of several hundred God Kings immediately erupted from behind. The sacrificial soldiers of the Gong family all stood up, gathering behind Gong Rui's. These several hundred sacrificial soldiers were the source of Gong Rui's great confidence, because they had all grasped formations that the Gong family had passed down to them. A formation composed of several hundred sacrificial soldiers could rival a first heavenly layer infinite prime. Jin Hong, I've been sent into the world of the fallen beast by my clan, so I represent our Gong family. You've attacked me recklessly and even injured me. You've severely provoked the dignity of our Gong family. I can ignore what happened just then, but if you continue getting in my way, you can't blame me for ignoring the bigger picture, Gong Rui said coldly. Now that he had emerged from the Two World Mountain, he was safe. He no longer believed he needed assistance from anyone else anymore, so his confidence obviously swelled up. Although Jin Hong's identity as the successor of a Grand Exalt brought him great respect, he had yet to grow to a point where the Gong family had to take him seriously. If Jin Hong did not purposefully get in his way, he obviously would have respected Jin Hong as well, but now that Jin Hong had already injured him, Gong Rui's would never remain silent in the face of humiliation anymore. Jin Hong did not become angered over Gong Rui's haughtiness. His expression did not change at all, but his aura did become even stronger. He said nonchalantly, "Ignore the bigger picture. Gong Rui's, I'm not going to threaten you. I just want to make it clear to you that if you really do forget the bigger picture and ruin everything for all of us for the sake of your personal matters, I, Jin Hong, will personally take your life without any hesitation." Jin Hong was direct and straightforward and spoke with firm resolve. He was imposing. With that, not only did Gong Rui's expressions suddenly change, so did the expressions of over half of the prodigies present. Over the few months they spent together, everyone gained some understanding towards Jin Hong, so they knew Jin Hong's personality very well. They knew Jin Hong was not one to boast and he would be serious with anything he said. There were basically no falsehoods in the words that came out of his mouth. Since he said he would kill Gong Rui's, it meant that he really did have the resolve to do that. He was not just trying to frighten him. Ping Yixing of the Empire Lotus Sword Sect said as well, "Gong Rui's, don't forget about your identity. If I remember correctly, the greatest figure that your branch in the clan depends on is a great elder, an 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime. Who knows how many descendants the great elder has who are countless generations from him, just like you. The funny part is that even the ancestor of your branch can't represent the Gong family, so what right do you have?" Ping Yixing paused, before continuing, "Let me just say something unpleasant. Even if I kill you right here and now, what can your ancestor do to me? Is he supposed to kill me in revenge? Gong Rui's expression darkened. He stared at Ping Yixing coldly, but that was all he could do. He could not refute him. In terms of status, he was indeed lower than Ping Yixing, because the greatest figure in his branch was just a great elder, just as Ping Yixing had said. In the Gong family, great elders still had to follow the arrangements of their grand prime ancestor. As for Ping Yixing, he was a direct disciple of the current sect master of the Empire Lotus Sword sect. The sect master might not have been particularly powerful, but his master was the grand prime ancestor of the Empire Lotus Sword sect. The ancestor behind Gong Rui's was an 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime great elder, while Ping Yixing's grandmaster was a grand prime. There was no point in comparing statuses. It's true that just Gong Rui's alone can't scare you off, but what if you include us? With that, Kong Feiying, Chu Jia, Zhou Ji and Zhou Wenbin all walked over, standing in a row with Gong Rui's. Over half of the prodigies present watched on like it was all just a show. None of them were concerned with Gong Rui's and the others' personal grievances with Yang Yutian, as well as Jin Hong's treatment of them. They would not interfere. As a result, the 5 of them formed a group. Coupled with the God King's sacrificial soldiers behind them, they formed a force to be reckoned with. Jin Hong remained unfazed. He glanced past Chu Jia, Gong Rui's, Kong Feiying, Zhou Wenbin and Zhou Ji. His gaze that had remained indifferent the entire time actually now shone with some coldness. He Qianqian, why don't you give the divine hall to me to hold on for now? I'd like to see who's bold enough to take things from me. After a moment of silence, Jin Hong suddenly said to He Qianqian. His voice became rather cold. He Qianqian obviously did not turn him down, agreeing to give the divine hall to him, because if the divine hall remained in her hands, she would be outnumbered and easily overpowered against the 5 of them if they insisted on taking it from her. And, Jin Hong's tone made He Qianqian understand that he was angry. Jin Hong, who had remained at ease the entire time, had lost his temper for the first time. Oh no. Oh no. There's bad news. At this moment, a frantic voice rang out. One of the sacrificial soldiers who had been sent out to gather news had returned. As soon as he saw Jin Hong and the others, he immediately reported, "There's bad news. The 100 Saints city has been completely occupied by the Dark Star race. Everyone that our various clans has stationed in the 100 Saints city has been slain." The news was like a pack of explosives, shaking up everyone's hearts. All of the prodigies changed drastically in expression. Even though they already knew that something had probably happened to the 100 Saints city, they never imagined it to be so horrible. The 100 Saints city had actually been occupied by the Dark Star race, and the people stationed there by their clans were all slain? Was the Dark Star race planning on declaring war against them? That's impossible. We don't have any particular big grievances with the Dark Star race. Why would they do that? Many of the prodigies became dumbfounded, struggling to accept the reality. Even though they had mentally prepared themselves, they never thought the situation would be so severe. The sudden news disturbed everyone. At that moment, no one could care about Yang Yutian anymore. Only a single message resounded through their heads. The 100 Saints city had already become occupied by the Dark Star race. Chapter 2745, Advancing towards the 100 Saints city. Afterwards, the sacrificial soldiers sent out for investigations all returned one by one, bringing back more and more information. The 100 Saints city has already been sealed up, forbidding the entry of any outsiders. It's already been overrun by the Dark Star race now. A portion of the people stationed in the 100 Saints city by the various clans managed to escape. The experts of the Dark Star race are currently hunting them down. The other independent cultivators from outside haven't been specially targeted by the Dark Star race. This time, the Dark Star race has only tried to slaughter our clans. The teleportation formations leading to outside within the Dark Star race have all been closed down. They're forbidding anyone from leaving. All 36 cities of the Dark Star race have made announcements to hunt down the people who escaped from the 100 Saints city. The pieces of news arrived one by one. Every single one of them was like a colossal mountain, weighing on the hearts of the prodigies, almost to the point where they struggled to breathe. They originally thought it was just a small conflict, a small skirmish, that could be settled very quickly once they had arrived. However, they never thought the situation would be so severe. They had actually become enemies of the entire Dark Star race. There was no space at all for them to remain within the vast world of the Dark Star race. Zi Xiaoji. At this moment, a cry filled with surprise and shock rang out. A few God King sacrificial soldiers arrived while carrying several dozen disheveled outsiders in tattered clothes. A prodigy among the crowd who had remained extremely discreet the entire time immediately shuddered and shot up from the ground, swiftly receiving the approaching group. Young Master Hao Ran. Young Master Hao Chen. In the next moment, the prodigy was overjoyed, rushing over emotionally, arriving in front of two pale-faced young men who were clearly injured in the end. Zi Xiaoji greets the two young masters. In the end, under the stunned gazes of the prodigies, he bowed deeply towards the two God Kings before him. Hao Ran. Hao Chen. Aren't they direct descendants of the Hao family? Uncertainty flashed through the eyes of many prodigies. Afterwards, their gazes towards Hao Ran and Hao Chen became cautious as well. The Hao family was a renowned, powerful clan across the entire Saints world. Even the tremendous clans behind these prodigies that they took pride in were afraid of offending the Hao family. Zi Xiaoji, you can spare the formalities. Has the clan received our request for reinforcements, which was why they sent you all here? Hao Ran helped up Zi Xiaoji. He glanced past the many figures in the mist emotionally. Zi Xiaoji nodded. Young masters, the outside world has already learned about what happened within the world of the fallen beast. The many clans have already banded together, basically using up all of their 100 Tribulations God King's pills to nurture large numbers of sacrificial soldiers, which they have sent into the world of the fallen beast. Good, good, good. That's just fantastic. The people trapped in the 100 Saint City finally can be saved. Hao Ran was deeply moved. He arrived before the prodigies with a quick stride and said sternly, everyone, some of you might know me, but the situation right now is extremely disastrous, so we don't have the time to catch up. There are still many of our people trapped in the 100 Saint City right now, and the 7th Hall Master has already ordered for their execution, so we can't waste any time at all. We need to save them immediately and take back the 100 Saint City which belongs to us. Brother Hao Ran, how are we supposed to oppose the entire Dark Star race with our power? Even if we take back the 100 Saint City, we won't be able to protect it from being taken again. After all, the Dark Star race has many primordial realm experts, Guang Wanhua of the Scarlet Light clan said in a troubled manner. Clearly, he was an old acquaintance of Hao Ran and Hao Chen. The situation's not as severe as you've all imagined it to be. We haven't become enemies with the entire Dark Star race yet. They only purposefully targeted us after the 7th Hall Master took control. As long as we take back the 100 Saint City, we'll be able to handle the 7th Hall Master. After all, it's not like we don't have arrangements of our own after all these years of operating among the Dark Star race, Hao Chen said sternly. Are you counting on the 2 Vice Hall Masters from the 9th and 10th Divine Halls? If they could be relied on, the 100 Saint City would have never been taken like this. He Qianqian said suddenly. Many of the prodigies had been provided with top-secret information for their trip into the world of the fallen beast this time, so it would make their operations among the Dark Star race easier. This included the members of the upper echelon within the Dark Star race that had been bribed by the 100 Saint City. Among the 9th and 10th Divine Halls, they each had a Vice Hall Master that secretly supported the 100 Saint City. Although the governing group of the Dark Star race changed with each millennium and the 9 other Divine Halls could not interfere during that period, a Vice Hall Master still possessed some weight within the Dark Star race. Even if they could not directly interfere with the process, what they said could influence the ruler's decision to a certain degree. We can't blame them either, because the 7th Divine Halls moved just too quickly. Coupled with our insufficient strength within the 100 Saint City, we lost the city very quickly, and we've lose our right to have a say in this matter without the 100 Saint City. But it's different now. With everyone's support, our strength has reached a point where we can no longer be ignored. Once we take back the 100 Saints city and unleash the might of the city, we'll be able to last a few months even against the attacks of the 7th Divine Hall. By then, the Vice Hall Masters of the 9th and 10th Divine Halls can help us out, and we'll have a chance at getting through this. Moreover, even if the plan fails, we can just rely on the teleportation formations in the 100 Saints city to leave the Dark Star world, as long as the city is in our possession, Hao Ran analyzed in detail. Everyone, you've just emerged from the Two World Mountains, so you probably don't understand the current situation within the Dark Star race. The Dark Star race has sealed off all teleportation formations leading to the entrance of the Spirit's world now. The only way for us to leave is through the 100 Saints city. The 100 Saints city is our only path of retreat. Another God King stood forward from behind Hao Ran and Hao Chen. He came from another clan and had rendezvoused with the Hao family in the Two World Mountains. If that's the case, let's set off immediately and take back the 100 Saints city. Jin Hong called out, immediately making his decision. No one objected to Jin Hong. None of the prodigies that had just crossed through the depths of the Two World Mountains wanted to go back through there. The 100 Saints city was their only safe way out of here now, so they had to take it back. Afterwards, the large group organized itself. The representatives of the group of people hidden in divine halls had been called out by Jin Hong as well. Everyone formed several dozen groups, arranging themselves in various kinds of formations and quickly advancing towards the 100 Saints city whilst maintaining their orderly manner. In the world of soul destruction, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes as he sat on the ground. He looked at the two god artifacts that radiated with a slight pressure as they hovered in front of him. He smiled in satisfaction. I've finally refined them. The sword doesn't suit me as well as the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, but my battle prowess will increase slightly yet again with it, Jian Chen murmured. With a thought, the two floating god artifacts turned into two streaks of light and vanished into his body. However, I need to wear the god artifact armor constantly. Although I can disguise myself as Kun Tian, it'll only be my appearance. I can't change what's inside me. Once I bleed, I'll be exposed. My blood's different from the blood of the Dark Star race, Jian Chen thought. The armor that he had just refined immediately appeared and enveloped his entire body, such that only his eyes remained exposed. Afterwards, he began to pace around in the land of soul destruction. Only after a final, careful check and confirmation that he had not left behind too many traces or any traces that might give him away did he make his way towards the entrance. When he approached the entrance, his energy suddenly surged. The power of the laws of the sword gathered on him, attacking the surroundings randomly. Immediately, deafening booms rang through the quiet land of soul destruction once more. As Jian Chen attacked the surroundings aimlessly, he flew towards the outskirts. When he left the land of soul destruction, his presence suddenly erupted, sweeping through the surroundings like a violent tidal wave. Even sharper and more powerful laws of the sword condensed, producing a great explosion around him, as if he was blowing up the sky. The sky rumbled as the earth tremored. Jian Chen displayed his strength fearlessly, creating a devastating disturbance that spread far and wide. In the end, after wreaking havoc to the surroundings with his sword qi, Jian Chen tottered and just collapsed on the ground, eyes shut and unconscious. At the same time, the 7th Hall Master just happened to be sitting on his throne with his eyes shut in the distant capital city. He seemed to be cultivating. Suddenly, he snapped open his eyes and his figure immediately vanished from the throne, appearing outside the divine hall. His deep eyes gazed in the direction of the land of soul destruction in surprise. Is that presence Kun Tian's? Uncertainty flashed through his eyes as his face rapidly sank. At the same time, figures also emerged silently from the other divine halls. They all looked in the direction of the land of soul destruction as their faces all changed. It's the Hall Master. It has to be the Hall Master. The Hall Master's broken through. From the 5th Divine Hall, the 3 Vice Hall Masters emerged outside. Every single one of them were overjoyed, flying towards the land of soul destruction eagerly. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.